All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know it's that time. It's Friday night, and that means we speak all the latest happenings here in the world of professional wrestling, sports, NHL, NBA, NFL, if that's a thing right now, Major League Baseball, plus much, much more with our Universal Champion, our head of the table when it comes to wrestling coverage and NHL coverage. He is the host of the Hockey Fan Chat Show. He's got his world title in his NHL sweater, though it looks like I'm not sure what team that is yet. He'll tell us at the end of the show. Well, good reasons why, and that is Mr. Randy Dillon. Randy, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good, Tom. How are you doing? Lots going on. We're 36 days away from WrestleMania. The NHL trade deadline's a week away. Baseball, Major League Baseball training camps happening close here, so a lot of good things.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. It was funny. I hear people, Randy, and they say, this is a boring time of year. And I say to myself, if you're a wrestling fan like we are, this is the best time of year.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you've got all these other stuff going. The NHL trade deadline, the NHL playoff race we'll get into. I mean, that is topsy-turvy to say the least. And the other sports are in the thick of things. But, Randy, I want to talk about my favorite topic right now, maybe your favorite topic, well, maybe, and that is the world of professional wrestling, and especially the WWE, the Elimination Chamber, because if you've been watching SmackDown, it looks like here, and Rob Maraska's joined us. Rob, you got to come on at 10:15. I ain't talking baseball memories right now, so I'm going to block you off because, Rob Maraska, unfortunately, I got to cut you off. Yeah, you got to go. Sorry. I don't mean to be like that, but we're talking wrestling. We'll come back to you. And Randy, before we were distracted a little bit there, Roman Reigns continues his reign. You kind of called it pretty much, but we do have some, I guess, openings here with the Bloodline and the Usos. I guess we'll feel a little bit more of that out at the end of SmackDown, but give me your impressions of the Elimination Chamber as we build, as you pointed out, 36 days until WrestleMania.
Well, go back to the Elimination Chamber last Saturday. What a show it was. I can't recall a show being that good before a WrestleMania. Now, maybe some Rumbles in the past, but that was just one of the best shows you could have watched. One of the hottest crowds you've seen in a very long time. A lot of great matches. One maybe questionable booking, but overall,
I think we're talking about Lashley and Lesnar, right, for the questionable booking.
That is the one, but overall, just a great show overall. So many twists and turns. And talk about the Elimination Chamber, I want to quickly, the men's, like, what a performance by all those guys, like, really putting themselves on a different platform. Looking at Bronson Reed, Damian Priest, Montez
Ford, yep.
Like, what a performance they had. Austin Theory, like, I know there was a lot of people questioning his abilities last year, but he is on a high right now, and he is showing why Vince kind of had him at there. The main event match was incredible. The crowd definitely played a part.
They didn't even touch for 5 minutes. You ever see that before, the title match, where the two wrestlers didn't even touch for 5 minutes?
Go back to ECW One Night Stand 06, but a little bit different, where the fans throwing toilet paper at John Cena. His shirt.
That was it. Yeah, I mean, listen, Montreal was definitely an interesting crowd, but I think Montreal had a little bit more respect than the Hammerstein Ballroom did, Randy.
That is definitely true, but I think it was a moment well done, because we won't know if Sammy's, like, it doesn't look like Sammy's going to get his WrestleMania moment, but I don't think he's going to get a better moment like that.
Well, he still might get the WrestleMania moment. He just may not get the championships held by Roman Reigns. That's, I think, the general
WrestleMania main event moment, I would say. He may.
All right, yeah, I think that's fair. No, that's definitely a fair point.
But that definitely was. It doesn't get any better than that, and the story they told in that match as well. The ups and downs, the believability at point Sammy was going to win. Jey Uso possibly hitting Roman Reigns with the chair for a moment there, but ultimately Roman Reigns we knew was going to come off top because of the reign, going to face Cody just made more sense in the storyline telling. But a lot of great things coming out for it. Raw and SmackDown right now, not many great things going into it. I can tell you that much this week so far.
Yeah, this SmackDown, I got to be honest, this week's SmackDown, I'm really not feeling it. I mean, we did have the segment with the Bloodline. I mean, Karrion Kross and Rey Mysterio, I feel like for the umpteenth time we're getting. Thoughts on before we'll come back to the Bloodline, but thoughts on the Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley sort of confrontation? I mean, Dominic kind of opened it up a little bit, and we kind of saw them go back and forth, and they talked about their I guess, spouses and their fathers, and then it kind of dived into kind of where it was a stare down between Rhea and Charlotte. And give me your impressions of that, kind of the first meeting in here for this title match coming up between Charlotte and Rhea Ripley.
One word, disappointing. It had a lot of potential. There could have been so much they could have built on, where they really built this on 3 years ago. Rhea Ripley getting beaten by Charlotte Flair for the NXT Championship. And now we look at it where, what are you really building it on? Where I did like Dom. At first I was confused, but I did like Dom right now has a lot of heat going for him. So I definitely think
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, he's the last couple of months, and I almost hate to say it, he's going into X-Pac territory a little bit for me. Xbox sucks, Xbox sucks, Xbox.
Yeah, no, that is definitely true there. But I really wish they would have done more with Rhea Ripley and Charlotte building this thing up, because the reports are this may main event night one, but after that, I'm not too sure. Like, if you're gonna main event one of the 2 nights, you have to have a big sell. You have to really make it interesting. Like, I would say it was interesting, but after this promo, I'm a little turned off to see, okay, how can they get us back into it?
Yeah, it did feel flat a little bit. I have to say, I did feel the segment was kind of flat. I think Dominic got probably a little longer than he should have. I would have liked to have just seen Rhea and Charlotte come out and kind of talk about the history, talk about the importance of this match, and kind of how the two wrestlers got there. They didn't really do that. They kind of took some subtle digs, and Charlotte mentions Andrade in a way, and they mentioned their fathers, and I mean, we'll see. Obviously, we've got a few more SmackDowns to kind of go off that, and then also wanted to talk about, and you mentioned Austin Theory. I want to come back to him because he gets. I mean, I have to say, Randy, he's had some big wins. But was this the biggest win of his career, actually, Monday night in Ottawa against Edge, who hadn't wrestled in Ottawa? I think this was his first appearance there. I had heard somewhere in, 17 years or something like that? I mean, that's got to be a big win. I mean, I know it obviously wasn't clean, but it was still a victory. And kind of talk about that, because I think you're spot on here. Austin Theory right now has been kind of the guy that he's carried Raw these past several months, and he might have got his biggest win yet.
Hands down his biggest win. Edge has shown he can still perform at the top level to the compliment he has done throughout his career, what he can do. So definitely, I would say up to this point, his biggest win. And give him credit, he's made that U.S. title really relevant again. Where when he first got it last year, it was kind of a joke and didn't really take everyone just putting it on just because. But he really put the importance on the U.S. title and making him coming to be a main event player. I still don't see him there yet. He's still a little bit away, but he's getting there. There's no doubt about it.
Well, speaking of that here, as I'm sure you're aware of, it was announced on Monday Night Raw. It would not be next week coming up, but the following week, somebody that is returning to Raw. We haven't seen him on Raw in quite a while, and I think you know who I'm talking about. That is none other than Mr. John Cena. And obviously that was mentioned. If you caught it all, the Elimination Chamber press conference, and they had asked after the show had ended, they'd asked Austin Theory about John Cena, and he gave an answer you would have expected. But what do you think happens there then when Mr. Cena comes back to town in Boston on Raw?
We're going to see. I think we're going to get an announcement of big match, John, first WrestleMania match in 3 years. So I think we're definitely going to get against Austin Theory for the U.S. title. I've been calling for this, so
you have been calling for it, Randy. You have certainly been calling your own shot, as they would famously say.
So definitely, I think it's definitely good. I think there's a lot, and this will ultimately be the big test for Austin Theory. If he can get the thumbs up from a guy like John Cena, it definitely goes in. But going back to Raw, one thing I'm questioning: Omos wanting to challenge Brock Lesnar.
I knew you were going there. You know, that there was one legend. I was going to go right after that, but let's go first to Omos and Brock Lesnar. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, we haven't seen Omos in a match, and he hasn't really won a match of any sort of substance in, I don't know, 9 months, maybe 10 months.
Yep, been that way. Now, the rumors are Vince McMahon has taken back creative control. Hasn't been announced yet, but
oh boy, here we go. Here we go. Some of the people on Facebook watching now are gonna go. Their hearts are gonna go up. Their blood pressure, to say the least.
I know, but this has Vince's handprints all over this type of match. Like, I I really don't know what the direction is for, and I was thinking about this earlier. Who does it benefit for a win? You give Omos a win over Brock, but Omos hasn't really shown he can he's a capable guy. And if you beat Omos, Brock beats Omos, it does nothing for him, just push him more down and takes his credibility. There's no win-win situation. And the other thing I'm interested in, Omos not the cleanest guy, and Brock has shown in the past if you don't do it proper, you're going to get hit. So this is going to be very interesting how this is all going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what you necessarily gain from this other than, I mean, I guess logically you'd say Brock is going to just beat the hell out of Omos, but what does that actually do for Omos as well? I mean, this is why to me, what's the point here of this?
It doesn't. I would rather see. I'll think with it. If you could put someone else against Brock, I would rather see him go against maybe Bronson Reed at this point. After the performance he had against the Elimination Chamber, definitely he had potential being a potential heel. And if you just want to give Brock a win and maybe try to build up someone's character, Bronson Reed seemed like a better capability. But
Let me ask you one side point, and I want to get to another legend who came back on Raw in a second here. Is Karrion Kross is about to do something here to Rey Mysterio that looks certainly interesting to say the least if you're kind of peeking back and forth there, but it looks like Rey has blocked the move. But, I mean, is there a possible, we know that MVP's had a relationship with Omos. We've seen that over last year and that whole situation with Bobby Lashley. You think maybe in a way this kind of leads to the Hurt Business maybe finally getting back together or maybe some hybrid version of it at all? Is there any way that we see maybe some seeds further planted on Monday night with that?
it has to, because let's go to SmackDown where we had Bobby Lashley calling out Bray Wyatt doing some very strange promo with Bobby Lashley. Like, again, we've talked about this has been a very weird episode of SmackDown. All of them can't be home runs, but definitely after.
No, well, yeah, I mean these aren't certainly hat tricks here. We're not
Yeah,
getting Connor McDavid like performances on SmackDown.
exactly. No Tom Brady touchdown, Patrick Mahomes clinching plays, but
No,
it,
unfortunately.
definitely been disappointing. But I would have to think you would have to start creating the Hurt Business. But again, Bobby Lashley versus Bray Wyatt doesn't do no good for either guy, because one guy's going to get pushed down even more, while the other doesn't get
Yeah, but
built.
this goes back to a point I think you disagreed with me. This was about 2 months ago, and I said, well, Bray, since he's come back, and I've been watching, they had that whole feud with LA Knight for quite a while, and we saw LA Knight wrestle Kofi Kingston sort of toward the early part of the show here on SmackDown, and I really feel like there really hasn't been that much of a direction with Bray Wyatt. I mean, we've had Uncle Howie and all this, but I mean, I just don't think there hasn't been really a true direction with a guy that you put a lot of time in bringing him back in. That's just my opinion.
It's absolutely true. We go back to the Pitch Black match where obviously it was just awful, but we know the reason why. Mountain Dew gave W a substantial amount of money, but
I still endorse the drink, by the way. I
yeah,
still endorse it.
but what are you doing? Like, there really hasn't been no story other than the LA Knight. Like, who is he going to face? Like, what is his future going to behold? Like, there's no really long-term storytelling with Bray Wyatt at this point. He's just been kind of giving promos saying, I'm happy to be back. We've seen the weird relation with Uncle Howdy. Like, okay, maybe should they go in a tag team direction, or are they building a group up? But it's really confusing what they're doing with Bray Wyatt at this point. Like, you don't get a sense of where he's going and how.
Yeah, I just feel like here was a guy that he held the title very briefly. He was one of the last people that Roman Reigns had been in a ring with to take the title off, and then you release him. He had some interesting feuds. Then you bring him back here, and I mean, you had this feud with LA Knight for a while. Okay, you had him call out Brock and Bobby. It seems like it's going in the direction of Bobby, but I still feel like I don't know. It's not complete almost.
It's not. There's a lot of gaps and holes, like where we've seen with Sami Zayn, for example. You could tell the story with even with Cody Rhodes, the direction, Rhea and Charlotte direction, Dominic and Ray a direction, but there's even with Gunther and they're the direction, but there's no direction with Bray Wyatt where who doesn't make sense for him to face, how is this going to elevate him, or how is it going to elevate someone else. It's really it's just kind of more of a filler, I would say, at this point. He's just there to put on a match.
Yeah, and that's the case. And it looks like here we see Dominic Mysterio and Rey Mysterio once again in the ring there, and it looks like they're deviating into something I would imagine for WrestleMania. Obviously, with Dominic being on SmackDown here, but I want to ask you. Speaking of another legend here, and going back to Raw, I know we're kind of a little heavy on Raw right now, but Lita's back. We're gonna see a match for the tag team titles here, and it looks like Io Shirai and Dakota Kai are going to put those titles on the line. They referenced the fact they were champions for 100 days. I think it's a little over 100 days now since that promo, and they're going to defend them against the team of Becky Lynch and Lita. And obviously, Lita saved Becky in that steel cage match with Bayley on the main event of Raw a couple of weeks ago before the Elimination Chamber. And we saw, obviously, famously last year, we saw that Becky and Lita had squared off in Saudi Arabia for when Becky was the champion at the time. But I mean, are we going to see a title change here? I mean, the way it's kind of building up here, I would kind of think here of any champions right now that could be in doo-doo here before WrestleMania. It might be, it looks like Damage Control's Io Shirai and Dakota Kai.
I don't think we're going to title change yet. It makes more sense to give a title change at WrestleMania for a little bit more of a pop. And I'm thinking long term as well here. How long is Lita planning to stay around? Are her and Becky just going to win the title so they can drop it at WrestleMania potentially to Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey, and then they can somehow rebuild the Becky and Ronda feud?
But that goes to my point. That would make sense that Lita and Becky would hold the titles for a little while, and it would give Ronda and Shayna a prominent match.
That's true there, but then is this the end for Damage Control? Because there definitely was potential at the beginning. I feel like because they didn't give Bayley the Raw Women's Championship, the group lost its meeting because it was kind of
I think Bayley coming up short in a lot of main event scenarios, whether it was Bianca Belair, whether it was obviously with Becky Lynch, that you didn't have that moment, you didn't have that crystallization where you could say, you know what, all right, this group is solidified, but they have held the tag titles for over 100 days, and they've been in a lot of main events. So apparently, I mean, if you're looking at it from a numbers standpoint, the ratings might indicate that Damage Control has done okay, I guess.
And they have brought relevance, I would say, to the women's tag team titles.
They have. I mean, they've done okay. I mean, you're seeing them in a lot of segments. I mean, we see them every Raw, Randy, at least 2 or 3 times on the show.
Yep. So they've done good, but I think the group is drying up. I think they're definitely going to be a break here. And then I'm really interested, does Io Shirai get a major push? Because listen, she was the face of NXT for a very long time, and I think she's definitely someone that could hold the title and possibly feud with Asuka down the road for a classic.
Oh, we'll certainly see. And I want to give a shout out to a man that is always with us, our guest on Wednesday, the Soul Collector, Skulls, Randy. He's one of the premier stars from the EWF, and certainly Skulls has always got a lot on his mind, and he says hello. So big shout out to Skulls here. And we are on Sportswire Radio with Mr. Randy Dillon of the Hockey Fan Chat, who you can follow on Instagram and Twitter at Randy, DHILLON. Very easy, very simple. Give him a follow. Also, check him out on sportnarium.com/player for the Hockey Fan Chat shows. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. All right, so obviously we spoke a little bit about Lita and Becky. We sort of have somewhat of a difference of opinion there. But Bianca and Asuka, we are heading to.
Yep.
And impressions there.
Going to be great. I think the character they built for Asuka is something different, similar to a little bit of her NXT. And a lot of people think this a little bit to her days in New Japan, but I really think she's going to beat Bianca Belair for the title.
Well, somebody's got to lose these titles at some point. I mean, somebody has to drop these titles. I mean, I know Roman's been on this miraculous run here, as some would say, in terms of the history books, and we obviously just referenced the tag team titles. Austin Theory, we referenced Gunther with the Intercontinental title in the run he's on. He opened the show. I mean, of anybody who could fall, I mean, I would have to say Bianca might be the most vulnerable.
I would say so as well, because with the tag team titles, it's kind of building. We know Sammy and Kevin Owens versus Jimmy and Jay.
Well, we don't know that just yet because we still have to get through tonight's SmackDown with Jay and Jimmy.
Gunther has really been unstoppable. Austin Theory is kind of like he could drop the title, but how he's telling this heelish wins are good.
Yeah, I don't think he should drop the
No.
title. I think right now he's one of these guys, Randy. I feel like there are some wrestlers that are chasers and others that need that title. And I think right now he's a good champion. He's not a chaser.
That's true. And then Roman Reigns, it's a historic reign he's been on. It's going to take a lot to beat him. So Bianca Belair does seem right. And I just think if you want to keep the women's division fresh, you do need to, I think, really emphasize the importance of the title and people keep going. I feel like if one person holds the title, we've seen in the past where if Becky holds the title, Charlotte holds the title, Bayley, Lita, sometimes it really stags some of the other, I'm not Sasha, not Lita, Sasha Banks, who hold the title for a long time. It really stags some development for others where you're just like, okay, you give them a chance, they lose, then what? So I definitely think for Bianca, I still think Bianca has so much credibility. She can still do a lot of great work, but I think for the purpose of the Raw tag time to drop, and maybe you ship her over SmackDown to have feud with a Charlotte Flair or Rhea Ripley down the road.
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Charlotte and Rhea. I mean, that's it. Logic would tell me Rhea would hang on, Charlotte would hang on, but part of me thinks Rhea is going to take that title. I don't know what it is, but part of me says Rhea is going to win that title from Charlotte Flair. I don't know why.
It makes sense for Rhea to win, but listen, Charlotte Flair is one of the top superstars, so it wouldn't surprise me she hangs on.
Yeah, fair points. And Skulls would like to point out that John Cena is going to call out Austin Theory on Raw in Boston, not this coming week, but the following week, to challenge him for WrestleMania. As that was Randy's point, was that John Cena hasn't had a WrestleMania match since COVID. That was the 2020 match against Bray Wyatt, right? That was the match that they taped. Yeah, the Firefly.
If you haven't watched it, watch it, because it is the most bizarre thing you're ever going to watch in your life.
Well, you know what? I'm still trying to block out that whole era during COVID when there was no fans. We had the Thunderdome. I'm still trying to block out all that because I was on the air talking professional wrestling during the COVID era, and it was really tough. I mean, I was happy to talk about something. I'll tell you that much. But I mean, certainly going back to that. We don't want to see that. And also on SmackDown, we have seen Sami Zayn has now arrived, and Sammy's got certainly a lot on his plate. And before I go over to AEW, I wanted to ask you, obviously, you being from Canada, and I was wondering if you had ever been to the Bell Center there in Montreal, and what did you think of the crowd there in terms of your overall kind of feelings on how they lived up or maybe exceeded expectations there for the Chamber? What was your thoughts on the crowd in Montreal?
They added so much to that that performance to the whole event. Like, I don't think that event would be as successful as a whole without the crowd, because they were hot on a lot of people. We saw the reaction for Edge and Beth. They were definitely hot for the men's as well for a lot of the competitors. They just show their displeasure heavily for the booking with Brock and Bobby, and just how they treated Roman as a...
You know, I was really upset at the fact that Dave LaGreca, the host of Busted Open, I mean, I really can't stand his voice. I have to admit. I know, obviously, I'm sort of a competitor of his because we cover wrestling around the rest of the world, where we're actually probably more well-known than Busted Open on Sirius Radio. He was going on talking about how he loved the finish. He thought it was a great match. And, I mean, this guy, like, clearly, I mean, the guy clearly was watching something that the rest of us weren't watching.
It didn't make sense because there's no end sight. Like,
there was no finality. There was no anything. You know, I mean, he was trying to say, well, Brock had to low blow Bobby Lashley, and he couldn't get out of basically the hurt lock, and it showed that Brock is vulnerable. But what match were you watching? I didn't get that impression at all.
It absolutely made no sense for any point now, and how the direction thing they're going, because you're kind of showing, okay, Brock, this cheap guy now, where so many years Brock has been a dominant force. I rather had Brock maybe low blow him and somehow get the win, where at least saying, okay, Brock had to go for a different tactic, but just a straight up DQ win just doesn't do anything for either guy, because at least with not the clean win, you can still show Bobby's kind of on top with Brock saying, listen, even though he beat me, Brock, no, he can't beat me. Brock has to
right, yeah. I think there should have been. I mean, I guess we both thought that the feud would continue. It remains to be seen if it would continue. I mean, they put so much hype and emphasis on this was the rubber match, and to me, it just didn't have finality, and I just, to me, didn't really feel the crowd agreed much either on that match. And that was probably I think I'm with you. That was the only match I really had an issue with. I think both chamber matches were pretty good. I think Montez Ford, Bronson Reed, I think those guys became stars. I like Logan Paul and Seth Rollins, how they built up on that toward the ending. I thought that was good. I thought the Edge and Beth Phoenix match was pretty good. Although I think, if I'm not mistaken, when Edge was down, didn't the referee actually kind of count to 3? Did
Yep,
you catch that point?
the
And then
ref
they didn't
botched.
acknowledge it?
There's a botch there. One thing I was told by legendary trainer Bruce Hart is if there's gonna botch, just make the call. If sort
They
it
didn't
out
do.
later or
And I was kind of waiting for. Nobody mentioned that on the screen. Like it was funny because the match ended a few minutes later, so somebody knew about it,
yeah.
and I was like, boy. And I should have asked one of the wrestlers that we had on today on Sportswire, but I didn't do it. When we have on Big Logan Sunday night on Sportswire Radio, it actually has met some of these wrestlers. I'll actually ask him that question. But I mean, I was like, in that case, and I was listening to I think it was Bully Ray this past week, and he said that you're technically supposed to count it, but it depends. Like they say that if you're you're the spot in the referee, if they kind of ignore it, it keeps their standing in the locker room. But if they count to 3, the finish in the locker room, they could lose respect. It was kind of like one of those complicated situations, but to me, it was a 3 count. That's all my point.
It definitely was a 3 count in that sense, and I do understand. Like if you're the ref, you count 3, you end the show, you end the match early. What do you do with the time to make it up? Definitely caused them problem. You nowadays, because everything you can catch in the blink in your eye, you can always tell the botch. Like obviously, that's not a good part on her, but you gotta give Fortune a little ring rest. But I can
Yeah, I mean, it was
understand.
a great match. I mean,
Yeah.
and credit to Beth. I mean, Beth did some stuff in that match that was just phenomenal, but unfortunately, it was a 3 count there. And let's move on here very quickly for a few minutes on AEW before I ask you some thoughts on the NHL before Rob Maraska comes back here. Skull said COVID ruined my WrestleMania when they were in Inglewood originally. Wasn't it Tampa was supposed to be WrestleMania 36 and then it was 37 they moved it to? Correct? Wasn't that, correct me if I'm wrong? And now they're in Los Angeles this year.
The original plan was 36 Tampa, 37 LA. So they pushed
Gotcha.
LA back a few years, did a repeat in
To
Tampa,
now.
threw Dallas in because they knew Dallas was a little bit more of an easier place to get the crowd.
Right. That's why, listen, we even had Tampa in 37 because Florida pretty much, like during COVID, was pretty much open and Texas was the next one. But yeah, that's a good point because I was wondering, Skulls, were you supposed to go? But the year back pushing, that's a fair point here. All right. So good enough there. And obviously, we see here Jey Uso has returned here and he kind of gave some type of look. He still hasn't made his mind up on where he's going as the show ends. But AEW very quickly. I mean, impressions on AEW. Obviously, Chris Jericho and Ricky Starks we're going to get. We had that famous MJF and Bryan Danielson stare down once again. And John Moxley was out there. And we saw the Orange Cassidy open the show. And we had this whole bizarre situation with Saraya and Tony Storm. And then we saw here Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker and Ruby Soho. But give me your impressions on AEW this past Wednesday with Dynamite.
I really am enjoying Ricky Stark and Chris Jericho. The big question is Ricky Stark going to get over? That's the question we're going to look at. I like how they're...
You know what he did, right?
Yeah, the pen, bring back the... Definitely, like someone was saying, if there's one person gets someone's attention clicking a pen, it is Chris Jericho. So that is for sure. I'm interested to see how the triple threat's going to work out with Saraya, Ruby Soho, and Jamie Hager. See if Britt Baker's going to put a part in there. The MJF and Daniel Bryanson, I did like the promo, but
I thought the promo was really intense. I mean, it talked about how MJF talked about like his situation, and he basically talked about Danielson's family life and kind of what he does and why he does it and why Danielson may not. And I thought that was pretty good. I thought that was probably the better promo of the night, I think.
It was, but my problem was they've been talking about this 60-minute Iron Man match. The promos they have really delivered is not selling me on this is going to be a 60-minute Iron Man. So wrestling fans think of this an Iron Man match, especially 60 minutes. You're thinking of Shawn and Brett, the ability.
Oh, right. Obviously, Steamboat and Flair, and you're thinking about The Rock and Triple H, and you're thinking about a lot of different wrestlers that could pull it off. And we've talked about this. MJF still hasn't wrestled many matches.
And it just how the promos have gone, how he's kind of withering, like not really wanting to face Bryan Danielson. I feel like would it make more sense to do this as a regular match, and then maybe in a few months you could go back to double or is it double or nothing? I think double or nothing. The next pay per view in May.
That's in May, correct?
Yeah, and you can go back, maybe do the Iron Man match there as a long term plan. But I just feel the Iron Man match at this point is a mood point in this feud, and you gotta understand the full hour has been booked for this match, and I don't feel like they're really trying. They're trying to. It's kind of been the good guy, bad guy feud, but with an Iron match, I really want to see who is the better wrestler, and we're not getting that. We're not really getting that at this point.
Because I don't think anybody with a straight face would tell you that MJF is going to be a better wrestler than Bryan Danielson, and I don't even think we know what this match is capable of. I mean, I don't know how you train for it, because MJF has wrestled, I think, literally a dozen times in a year. Again, we've talked about this. He's wrestled a dozen times in a year. I don't know how you can make up for that.
You can. Ric Flair said this to Triple H a few years back. A wrestler's worst enemy is time off.
And exactly, and that's why to me, again, I don't know how you can't change the fact he's only wrestled 12 times a year. Listen, I interviewed Vito Fratelli, who holds 8 championship belts, and I'll get to a few questions in a second on the NHL, and he's wrestled 100 times in the past year. He wrestled, and I brought this up. I exactly brought this up. He has wrestled 100 times in the past year. He even said he would have a hard time going 60 minutes in the match. And he's wrestled 100 times. Think about that. So his schedule, and he's actually wrestled more than a lot of the WWE, AEW, Impact, MLW, NWA wrestlers who are in the big time. And he said that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, an Iron Man match the crowd is going to play a part of it if you cannot keep them interested for that long. For sometimes hard to keep the crowd into a 20 to 25, even 30-minute match. But for a whole hour, you have to keep them engaged. And I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm really interested. This could be a big dud.
It could be. No, there's no question about that here. Also, let me get to a few comments before I go into the NHL and give you a few minutes on that. Bobby Lashley stole Chris Masters' Master Lock. Yeah, we're talking about the Master Lock Challenge. Remember the Master Lock Challenge where Chris Masters was undefeated for that? In fact, ironically, Bobby Lashley, wasn't he the first person to break the Master Lock, if I'm not mistaken?
Definitely was, but let's not forget it was 2 years later that he broke it after it became a big thing, kind of.
I know. Well, I listen. I mean, I did remember it. That's all I'm trying to say. And Skulls said he remembers when Grimm, who's an independent wrestler in New Jersey, and Skulls has had a little bit of a beef with him, says he actually remembers him kidnapping MJF. And briefly, Keith Lee versus Swerve. Any thoughts on that? Obviously, Keith Lee's back in action. Anything on that?
Too late. It's way too late to do it now. I understand you want to get the big match's name, but the problem with AEW now, again, for some reason, Juan gave them the best promotion of the year in 2022. I did
see that. I did see that.
I really hope it's some joke, but a lot of these are questionable, but not.
Well, because AEW is the Twitterverse social media darlings. You and I both know that.
That is true. You criticize WWE, you're crying for murder. You criticize AEW, how dare you? But I think it should have happened earlier, because now, like, the momentum's dead here. It's like you have no momentum in this feud. A win for either not really going to do anything for the.
Yeah, Keith Lee is a guy. He came in, had a lot of hype, and then they brought him in for a little bit. And that's, again, I've said this for months about AEW. That's my one gripe with AEW. I mean, Christian came back, and we saw that Jungle Boy had him, and then he kind of let him go. And then Christian was about to basically do what Jungle Boy didn't do to him, and we saw that kind of basically dive into things. But that's the problem with AEW. They have so many wrestlers that they sign, and a lot of them, they really can't do anything with them significantly. And that's kind of why they have the problem that they have with some talent. And even though the fact they have Dark, they have Elevation, they have Rampage, which is on Friday nights, they have Dynamite. Now we're going to see another show, which is kind of their, I guess, AEW version of Total Divas, because you're going to see it's Adam Cole who's going to return to action. I believe I believe it's next Wednesday.
Yeah, next
Wednesdays from now. 2 Wednesdays from now, he's going to return. And then we're going to see his relationships, and you're going to see Sammy Guevara and Ty Conti, and obviously Dr. Britt Baker with him. I'm sure we'll see some other people there, and that's, again, a kind of a knockoff, I think, of Total Divas and what that tried to accomplish. But certainly that's kind of the AEW side of things. But NHL, obviously, a lot to get into here. I mean, the Eastern Conference, I'll get a few thoughts on that. It looks like maybe the Rangers are on the verge of acquiring Patrick Kane. Islanders had a tough loss tonight against the Kings, 3-2, down 3-0, came back. Certainly, the Eastern Conference playoff race is certainly mixed with a number of teams. Penguins are on the ropes. Capitals, your team is on the ropes. They made a move yesterday, and then you've got teams like the Sabres and Red Wings, who you're wearing the Red Wings jersey for, and they've got a lot of games on hand, and that would indicate that would favor them in terms of getting in one of these spots. So first, what's your impressions on the landscape of the Eastern Conference?
Well, Tom, it could be for the first time since 2006 we don't have the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins both in the playoffs. So this is new territory. We're not going to see Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin, but there's still a lot of hockey to be told. But it's really going to be coming down who's going to make the big trade for. I look at the Red Wings, the Sabres, the Panthers, and the Penguins. Who's going to make a trade to kind of get back in the spot? The Washington Capitals, after trading Dmitry Orlov, their best defenseman, no John Carlson. He's done due to the face injury back in December. So I don't see them going on a crazy win streak, but stranger things have happened in the NHL. With the Rangers, Patrick Kane, is he really the right fit for them? The Sportswire guys and I were talking. Does it make sense to make Patrick Kane, or would it make sense to improve the D? The Islanders, I definitely think they have to make another move, but they don't have enough pieces to make a move. And the team that might surprise us all to make it may be the Detroit Red Wings and the Buffalo Sabres, may be the two teams.
Well, I mean, they have the games in hand mathematically. I mean, law of logic would say if they just play 500 in those games, they would, by percentage points, take both those playoff spots.
Not only that, they are a young team rebuilding. They have assets if they want to make moves at the deadline. If they really want to make a push in the playoffs.
I kind of think Buffalo, because they have had the longest playoff drought in the league, I would kind of think this is the year to kind of make it. I mean, I would have to think. I mean, you've missed the playoffs in over a decade. I would kind of think this would have to be the moment, no?
I think every new year going to the NHL, you never know what's going to happen. Injuries, how a team plays, chemistry, so much can go wrong at the start. We saw with the Vancouver Canucks this year as a great example of team with so much high expectation from the year before. So Buffalo's in a spot to make it. They have the games in hand. I think goaltending, is a spot they can definitely increase. So, but the goalie market is such a hard spot right now. Same with the Detroit Red Wings, but the big talk with them is Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi, what they're going to do. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a sinking ship. The Ottawa Senators are technically still in the race, only 6 points out. But
yes, we talked about them. The Senators have played a lot better, actually, the last couple of weeks. They're over 500, and it's a franchise that has been down for a while. But you feel like they might be a year away from being the Sabres and the Red Wings are right now, in a way.
And the Islanders are going to need some help. Today was just...
Yeah, it's a tough loss. Tough loss tonight.
You don't come to play. You're playing a Kings team that coming off a hard game against Jersey. Jonathan Quick has been awful this year. You come up with 18 shots, 8 shots.
Yeah, you played flat the first 36 minutes, something like that, 35, 36 minutes. I mean, it's irresponsible almost to play like that.
You're now playing with fire at this point. You got to hope these teams get them wins. And listen, the Red Wings, 6 of the last 7 sweeping Western Canada. A big win.
And they got off to a good start early in the year, and that kind of maybe gave them the capital when they had that rough patch. Whereas the Islanders also had gotten off to a good start, but they had a prolonged drought here. And even though they lost tonight, they had played obviously much better, no question. Points in 9 of the last 12 games going into today. But the Islanders, because of the amount of games they've played, don't have that beauty really to lose a game like they did tonight. And again, law of logic says by percentage points, Buffalo and Detroit will make the playoffs. And the Capitals seem like they're kind of on the outside looking in right now. They're on the ropes because they've played more games in hand. I mean, Pittsburgh still has the games in hand. They could still make it. But I
But
mean, the way
after
they
last
play.
night's game in Edmonton, there are problems in Pittsburgh.
That was gonna be my next point. Let me get to a few comments before I go to the Western Conference. Skulls is funny. He says, "Quack quack, go Ducks." He says
Boo.
the LA Kings practice in Skulls' hometown because Skulls is from California, and Joey Bostrom here, who's been with us on some of the shows, says that's the beauty of the NHL. You never know what's going to happen. I think the Eastern Conference is really basically the perfect indication of that because you have again so many teams jockeying for two spots. You've got Buffalo. You've got Detroit. You've got Florida, which is still alive. You've got Ottawa because of the games in hand. They're technically still alive as well. Then you've got the Islanders, the Penguins, and the Capitals, although those three teams, there's varying levels of confidence. The Islanders, I guess, are going to hang around. I know Chris Bizet has always been talking about the Islanders. I'm not quite sure what they do. My gut says, and somebody asked me this question Wednesday night, I said my gut would be probably to stand pat because, I mean, you really, well, you're going to sell your parts. You don't even have that many parts off, and you're in technically a playoff spot. So that's it's a very, very tough catch-22 here. In Western Conference, the Calgary Flames, who you're not wearing a jersey of, they seem to be right now, Randy, the team that I'm most concerned of at the moment. But when it comes to these teams here in the Western Conference, maybe that are in and out, give me your thoughts on a few of these different teams.
Okay, so the Calgary Flames, they are I think we talked about a few weeks now, they are in deep trouble. They're losing games. They've lost 12 games in overtime in a shootout this year. Majority of them
the Islanders. That's been the Islanders' story this year. They've not played well in overtime and shootouts.
Those games or a quarter, you win 4 of those games or 5, you're kind of in a better position. I don't know what they're going to do at the deadline, or can they afford to anything because they gave up a lot. Well, they didn't give up a lot in the Huberdeau trade, but years past, last year at the deadline, they gave up a lot. So they're definitely in a little bit of a pickle here. The team I'm actually interested in to see what they're going to do is the Seattle Kraken because
good point.
They are 4 points ahead of the Flames, but the Flames have one game more played with them. So, and this is a team that really had an up and down year.
They got off to a great start, faltered, had a good run, but now they're struggling the last couple of weeks.
I'm very interested what the Colorado Avalanche do at that deadline because they desperately need a second line center. But I think with O'Reilly, Bo Horvat gone, what are they going to do? The Winnipeg Jets and the Dallas Stars are two teams I'm very interested in what they do because these are two teams that could possibly sneak into could go to the Stanley Cup final from the West. I don't think a lot of people are talking about them. Winnipeg, Connor Hellebuck.
You have to remember in the Western Conference, there's a lot of parity. In the East, we've got the clear teams, right? We've got Boston, we've got Carolina. Then you've got the next tier with Tampa. You've got the Rangers. Then you've got the Devils and Toronto, which will be playoff teams, but there's varying lack of confidence. In the Western Conference, I mean, there's a lot of parity there.
But even in the East, I'm thinking the move the Bruins made, getting Dmitry Orlov on defense, adding Garnet Hathaway, I think they've really put themselves at the top of the class because I look at Tampa, they still have some work to do, and do they have enough gas? Toronto, there's a question definitely in that and playoff pass. Carolina, there's questions on this team. Can they get it done? The Rangers, I think, need more a defenseman than anything than a forward and Patrick Kane. So there's definitely some questions.
But the point is still made that you've got Boston as your top. Carolina, you still expect to win at least a round. Mm-hmm. And then you've got teams like Tampa who have been there, but again, you bring up the amount of games they've played the past several years. You got the Rangers, Toronto, and New Jersey. And so it kind of, whereas in the West, I think there's a little bit more clearer parity. I mean, Colorado is 5 points out of first place, but they've got several games in hand. Again, this whole quirky games in hand scenario. So the division standings can change drastically in that conference, in that division especially.
The other thing I'm interested with the Central team, that do you want to maybe go through the Pacific, which I think might be a little bit easier, because I think every team in the Pacific, there's questions. Vegas has a question.
Edmonton has a question, certainly, as they usually do.
Goaltending's been awful. So I think there's more of if you're a Central team, maybe like Colorado, do you want to maybe go through the Pacific, or Minnesota fall a couple of down? You want to go through the Pacific, but if you got to play the top team regardless, but definitely I would say in the West, the Central is going to be the top where the Pacific is, if you might have an easier trip to the conference final.
Absolutely. Listen, I would certainly want to take my chances and play the Seattle Kraken. I would want to take my chances if I can to play the Edmonton Oilers. But in both those divisions, certainly the standings could change, as Limp Bizkit's album once famously was. Results could certainly vary. Whereas in the Eastern Conference, I think it's really more about those two spots and who gets them. Whereas I think in the West, there's still a lot of room for improvement and jockeying. And a few more comments before we get to closing thoughts here and here from Rob Morosco, though on the baseball end of it really isn't much to talk about, but we'll give him a few minutes. Here, the Islanders need the Island Boys. Are we talking about the one of the tag teams from the Samoans? Right? Wasn't it the Island Boys? If I'm not mistaken, I think that was one of the Samoans, because there's a bunch of Samoans that are from California. Rikishi, Samoa Joe. There's a number of them from California. I think Skulls will probably quote me on that. And the Bash Brothers, which is obviously baseball, Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco. And then I was thinking about also tag team was the Basham Brothers. Remember the Basham Brothers? They held the tag team titles for a long time on SmackDown. Remember that? They held it for a very, very long time. Whatever happened to the Bashams? It's been a while since their name was kind of brought up. And Joey Bostrom gives you a big, big shout out. All right, Randy. So I want to give you the floor now, give you some closing thoughts. Anything else you want to plug, share, say it. Always enjoy having you as our leadoff, and I was glad it worked out this way. I was supposed to have been out earlier, but scheduling didn't work in my favor, but it actually worked out for the better because we got to speak some wrestling and people got to tune in, and maybe some NHL we did as well along the way. So floor is yours, my friend, and fire away.
No problem, Tom. It's always great to be here. Highlight Friday night. Unfortunately, next week I won't be here. I'm going to be.
So you're telling us 45 minutes of memories with Rob Morosco? I'm only kidding.
I'm going to be in Anaheim, so maybe at a game or Disneyland.
We'll see. Nice.
But definitely with the trade deadline, interested to see if teams like Carolina, Dallas, possibly win at the Jets, are they going to make a big move to improve those teams? If Patrick Kane does end up to the Rangers, what are they going to do, and how can they get to defend the cap? And is it the right move? For a WWE standpoint, I'm very interested to see when are we going to see the first confrontation between Cody Rhodes
and Roman. Yeah,
it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And then on an AEW front, I'm not too sure if this may be the end of the Acclaim success as a tag team, because I feel like
good one,
because they have this 4-way tag team match. They put Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal in the ring, and I feel like the other tag team we don't know, but I feel like it could be the end for them, because when you do a fatal 4-way, it kind of means one tag team either going to take a fall where you don't want the other one to take. So if the Acclaim doesn't if the Acclaim doesn't win the tag team titles and the gun comes out of it, I really feel like the Acclaim success could be coming to an end. But I hope I'm wrong there, because they are dynamite. And the last thing is, I pray Vince McMahon is not in charge of creative. Hopefully, Triple H just kind of puts him back.
They say he wants $9 billion, so I don't know for how long. And Triple H was asked that question on the post show of the Elimination Chamber, and he said he's still in charge. I mean, he said it. I mean, you have to take the guy's word for it. Certainly, look, Vince, I'm sure, is lurking, but yeah, I don't know. The Gun Club just got the titles to drop them after a couple weeks. I mean, it is AEW. I don't know. I mean, I'm still going to go with my gut and say the Gun Club hangs on, the Gun Brothers. But, yeah, the Acclaimed, if they don't get, they're one of these groups that needs the title. So that's, and Joe Dell, by the way, the legendary Joe Dell, of course, his wife, Laura, runs the Wrestling Roundtable group. And he says, scissor me daddy ass. Yeah. His wife would love to hear that, because his wife's a huge wrestling fan. They go to all the shows. ISPW they go to, which is big here in the independent scene in New Jersey. Tommy Fierro, I think he runs what's that collectible place? Joe will know, and I'll probably, after you're off the air, we'll probably remember it. But yeah, Billy Gunn, I mean, amazing shape that he's in. I mean, this guy doesn't age. He's got to be almost 60 now, and the guy looks like he's in better shape than he was when he was Mr. Ass, when it was right after the end of Degeneration X. And also Skulls wants to say the Island Boys were rappers, I guess, and the Bash Brothers were from the Mighty Ducks. Well, the Bash Brothers were famous in baseball also, which I'm sure Rob Morosco will talk about. He mentions the Wrestling Collective, so which you would like, Randy, because they have all the stuff. And Laura Dell, by the way, who's here, she heard that. She's the moderator of the Wrestling Roundtable group, which allows us to share our shows when you come on for wrestling. She also wants to give them a shout out in Stockholm, New Jersey. So that's where it is. And they live not too far from there. They run ISPW, and all the wrestlers come out there. It's a great place to visit. If I could, I certainly would do that. So you'd like that place. I'd like that place. But you're going to be in Anaheim next week. I'm going to be here. So until then, Randy Dillon, we look forward to hearing from you in 2 weeks, and enjoy the weather, enjoy the welcome change of climate, and hopefully you bring some of that sun and good wishes for us here in 2 weeks.
Sounds good, Tom. Always a pleasure. See you in 2 weeks.
All right, that was Randy Dillon, host of the Hockey Fan Chat. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Randy, DHILON. And we are joined here by Rob Maraska. And Rob, how are you, buddy?
Hey, what's up, Tom?
What's going on, buddy? So obviously we're getting ready for spring training here, start of the season. And give me your thoughts here as we're getting ready as spring training and games are going to take place here this weekend.
Yeah, finally, it's about time. I mean, we've been having spring-like weather here, so it feels like...
not so much today, but for most of the winter, yeah.
Today was freezing. But a couple of things going on in Mets camp. Joey Lucchesi pitched again after a couple of years, and he pitched 2 shutout innings in an intra-squad game. He gave up 1 hit and 1 walk. So, that's another weapon the Mets have in their back pocket. If you remember, he's coming back. So
they got him during the COVID times.
Yeah. So, looking forward to seeing him pitch. I think it's going to be a good camp. A lot of guys, like we said last week, are going to be at the World Baseball Classic. So we're going to get to see other players like Brett Beatty play. And, hopefully things are going to change for Darren Ruff. I don't know if he's going to make the squad, but they were talking about that this week. He came in camp saying he's ready. Let's see what happens. Also, Daniel Vogelbach came in 25 pounds lighter. So, these guys know that they got a good chance this year of going deep into October, and I think they all want to be a part of it.
All right, well, we'll certainly see. Let me get to a couple of comments here. Skulls says, bring a jacket, meaning, I guess if you're going somewhere, he says, bring a jacket. Jodell says, tweet, tweet, tweet. I appreciate that, I guess. I'm not quite sure what the reference is there. But, Daniel Vogelbach, obviously, that's a guy that early on in his Met tenure provided some big at-bats. Kind of slumped as the season went on, and obviously the bench will be key for this team once again. And maybe talk about a guy like Daniel Vogelbach again.
Yeah, well, I think, he started out good, like you said, and then he cooled off a little towards the end of the season, that Brave series and in the playoffs in the first round. But I like him. I think he's all right. He's a good addition to the team. Also in the clubhouse, he's good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he could bring to the team this year.
All right, got a couple of comments here. Basketball star from the city or county, as some might say, Nassau County, which is almost like the 6th city of New York City. Jason Getz says, where's the Brute Force Brad Weiss? He'll be here in about 5 or 10 minutes. So he'll have a couple of different things to say about some of the basketball scene on Long Island, and certainly about you, my friend, and congratulations on all the success. And he will recap it along with myself in about 5 or 10 minutes. Justin Gianelli, who'll be joining us soon, says, unfortunately, Ruff may have a leg up considering he can play first base. Pete Alonso will need a few DH days.
Definitely, I agree with that. Also, Major League Baseball's top 100 players list came out, and there are 8 Mets on that list. Number 14 is Verlander. Number 15 is Scherzer. So they got 2.
We got. And Alonso is, where did Alonso rank?
Alonso came in 31st. Lindor 21st. Then McNeil 45. Diaz 51, which I don't know why he's up there.
So you got Diaz 51. You got Lindor 21.
Yeah, Lindor 21, Nimmo 54, and Starling Marte 61. So the Mets have 8 players in Major League Baseball's top 100 players right now. So that's not too shabby.
And they would have had 9, right? With what's his face, Carlos Correa, right? Would have had 9, right?
Yeah, they would have. But you know what? The Mets may have dodged a bullet with him. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, that contract, I think the contract would have been just too long. And, do you think that ankle would have held out for all
I
those?
mean, you know what? That's going to be the big mystery here. That's going to certainly be the issue that I think we're going to find out. And obviously, speaking of guys that were injury here, Jacob deGrom looks like his luck continues to be the same, even though he's in a different uniform.
Yeah, I think he pitched today actually. And the spin is, he did pretty well, but we know what's going to happen with DeGrom. He's going to have trouble all year. That's another thing. The Mets dodged a bullet. Texas went for it, but I think that contract is just too long.
All right, and Skull says my angles changed, meaning your ankles would change, my angles would change. Could you clarify that? And Jason gives me a big shout out. Yep, thank you, Jason, for that. I appreciate that. So, what else are you watching here when it comes to the Mets? Obviously, we'll see the guys in action here coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the kids play while the other guys are at the World Baseball Classic. We'll see how Vientos plays. So that in a way, they have a lot of guys going to the Classic, but now we get to see the younger guys play, and I'm looking forward to seeing them play.
All right, fair enough. And just for those that are watching and listening at home, Mets in action 105 against the Astros. They're also going to have, it looks like a split squad game with the Marlins 6:10. And then Sunday, they'll be in action against the Nationals, also 1:10. Monday, 105 against the Cardinals. And you'll see most of these games at 1 o'clock. You might get a few games here and there. And the spring training season concludes here on March the 26th against the Marlins. And home opener is coming up in April, but we start the season March the 30th, 4:10 p.m. game against the Marlins, Rob, and that'll be 5 weeks from today. So the season is not too far away when it comes to this team.
No, it'll be here before you know it. And like you said, they're playing the Nationals. So we're going to see Dom Smith playing first base for the Nationals this year. And today he predicted that since he's going to get steady play, he thinks he's going to have a pretty good season. So we'll have to see what happens. It was time for him to go, though, from the Mets. But who knows? Wish him luck with the Nationals. We'll see what happens with that.
Couple of comments here. Also, Skull said Anaheim. I guess the Angels he meant. So I guess that's what he meant. His Angels have changed. Yeah, the Angels definitely changed. Justin also wants to point out he took Juan Soto's number 22. So if you see a 22, that'll be Dom Smith, and he's going to play. He's going to get a lot of at bats there on a team like that. They're going to give him as many at bats possible that he wouldn't have gotten a Mets uniform, and maybe that's a change of scenery better for a guy like Dom Smith.
Yeah, I think that was a good move for him. He, his tenure with the Mets were done. We saw what happened last year, towards the end of the year and the playoffs. He disappeared. So I think it's a good move for him. He's going to have a lot of playing time. The Nationals are not going to be good, as we know.
No, they're going to definitely be the team that a lot of teams, especially the Mets, Braves, and Phillies, are going to look to beat up on. And obviously, payrolls came out, and the Mets and Phillies were right at the top of the list. And Mets pretty much blew everybody out of the water there when it came to the payrolls.
Yeah, well, Cohen put his money where his mouth is, and the other owners are complaining a bit, but you know what? He said that's not his problem. That's their problem. They should be spending more money instead of pocketing that shared revenue. And that's true. They're pocketing stuff, and they're putting crappy teams on the field. It's really ridiculous. And you know what? It's good for the Mets, and it's good for us.
Absolutely, and very quickly here, top payrolls, Mets first, $336 million I have here on Sporttrack.com. Yankees second, $267, just under $268. Padres are third, obviously, because they've got some big contracts they've inherited the past few years. Obviously, Phillies have certainly come up here and they're fourth. Usually they're first or second, but the Dodgers this year are only fifth. Surprisingly, the Blue Jays are in sixth. The Blue Jays have definitely have spent quite a bit over the years. Angels in seventh, of course. Skulls as Angels, Braves, Astros, and Rangers are in the top 10, and other teams that rounded out Cubs, White Sox, Giants, Red Sox kind of at the middle of the pack this year, and Cardinals also there as well, and the Twins 17th. And just think about without Correa, they probably would have dropped to maybe right around 20. And then lowest payroll this year, the Oakland A's at 41 million, and the Orioles are at 51 million, and they kind of have a good ball club, and the Rays are there also at 64 million usually, and that's kind of where it rounds out. And Joe, I'd like to ask you, do you think the Mets payroll is well spent?
Yeah, so far it looks good. We'll have to see what happens during the season. Remember, we have Verlander. They're older. Him and Scherzer are older. They could get injured just like DeGrom. So we'll see what happens. But Verlander won the Cy Young last year, so let's hope that it just continues. But you never know. That the Mets have an older pitching staff, so
obviously at the top of the rotation, they definitely have. Certainly, this is a short window. This will be the equivalent of Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. This is really here about short term and short term only. Couple of comments here. Joe Dell says, "Fingers crossed, no injuries." Joey Bostrom says it's World Series or bust for the Mets. Is that true for you?
Well, Cohen has given the Mets the 5-year goal. Okay,
so what are we in year 3 right now of his ownership?
Year 3, but I think they have to go long into the playoffs, and make the World Series. It's the East. National League East is going to be tough because the Phillies improve themselves too.
Yeah. The Phillies, listen, they've made some moves. Trey Turner, and Harper eventually comes back, and they've got Wheeler there. We saw him with the Mets, and they've got a number of different players. They're a good ball club. The Phillies certainly showed what they could do in the postseason. The Braves, despite losing a chip or two, are still the Braves, and they won 100-plus games. They surpassed us, won the World Series 2 years prior, so you have to give them a lot of credit. So it's going to be very tough for the Mets, no question about that. And you got in the other divisions, you've got the Padres, you've got the Dodgers that are right there. You've got in the Central, you've got the Cardinals. The Cubs are improved. The Brewers are hanging around, and you've got the Reds who improved a little bit last year. So there's a lot of teams there that are certainly jockeying for position, and we'll see how the Mets wind up. And Skull says, I miss the Mark McGwire and the Sammy Sosa era. Yeah, that's kind of like how wrestling fans miss the Attitude Era, and that was certainly a moment in time. And the McGwire and Sosa days were almost kind of like the Attitude Era, 1998, 99, 2000, and those guys were larger-than-life characters, and baseball is certainly lacking that, but we'll see. Obviously, we're all excited. 5 weeks from today is the start of the season, so it's not too far away. Like Rob correctly pointed out, winter has definitely gone quicker than a New York minute. The weather has, for the most part, cooperated with us. We've had some, cold days here and there, but very sporadic, and I think that's going to give us the good vibes. It looks like the groundhog here on Staten Island has been spot on, and even if we do get some, cold weather, look, it's only a few weeks left, and that's good. And the clocks go back in 2 weeks. We get an hour extra sun. So a lot on the pike, a lot on the horizon. Rob Maraska, I will get one more comment from Carlos Otoro Chavez before closing thoughts, and he says the shift rules can play a big role to those teams who lack pitching. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. We'll have to see how that goes. All these rules, like I mentioned last week too, that stupid ghost runner rule in extra innings during the regular season. I don't like it. I've complained about it since COVID. It's a crazy rule. It's stupid. That's not baseball. I think they're ruining baseball, but what are you going to do? Also, today, Manny Machado became the first player to have an at-bat with a strike before he even got in the batter's box, because in a spring training game, he was late to get to the plate. So there goes that clock.
I don't know if I've heard that before. Somebody actually being late to the plate, and somebody that might be curious about that is somebody who's a huge fan of ours and a huge Padres and Chargers fan when they played in San Diego, Anastasia Riznia. So certainly the San Diego fans probably aren't too thrilled about that, but hopefully Mr. Machado doesn't do much of that. That's a team that's going to be under a lot of pressure. Obviously, Tatis, we hope to see him back, and hopefully doesn't get injured. Machado, obviously, news about him. He wants to opt out. Darvish looks like he got a big deal, and he's going to be under the spotlight. Now, a lot of those players that we saw them give the Mets a lot of fits. And before we move on and get Chris Pizzea and Justin Gianelli and the rest of the gang on, I like the new rules. Some were much needed. Yeah, we'll talk about those in a few minutes with you, Chris. And Rob Maraska, I want to give you the floor. Obviously, some closing thoughts. I know contest winner will be announced soon at some point as well. And anything else you want to plug, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, the contest. I'll announce next week. The winner of the contest. I just wanted to make a quick note about the Braves too. The Braves, the Braves are going to be tough. And remember, the Braves have a new catcher too. They got Sean Murphy from Oakland A's, and he's a Gold Glove winner in 2021. And last year he hit 18 home runs and 66 RBIs. So, you got to watch out for the Braves too. So it's going to be a tough division. It's going to be a fun baseball season. Let's just hope this year the Mets aren't in first place and then give it up in the last half of the season to the Braves again for the third year.
What? Unfortunately, that was, the Mets had played a hell of a season, went over 100 games, but don't win the division, and they came down to that series in Atlanta and getting swept, and that kind of led to why the Mets were bounced early in the playoffs against the Padres in the first round there, and unfortunately, those things do happen. And a couple comments here as the gang comes on here. I would be doing an event at the 66ers in San Bernardino next month. All right, Skulls, we'll maybe get more details about that later in the week on Sportswire. Of course, Skulls is a star from the EWF out in California. Carlos Otoro Chavez says, Machado not late to the bank to cash them checks, though. Excellent point there. Of course, he'd never be late to the bank with that check because he'd make sure he runs to that bank. But when it comes to running to the plate, not so much there. So Twitter obviously can follow you at R. Maraska. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, and on Facebook, Rob Maraska. And also one last quick thing about Machado. He's going to opt out after the season. So who knows what's going to happen with him. But that's it. I'll have the winner of the contest next week.
Absolutely. Look forward to all of that here. Again, everybody follow Rob Maraska on Twitter. You can do that at R. Maraska. Also, Facebook, friend him at Rob Maraska. All right, my friend, we will definitely see you coming up here next week, and we look forward to who wins.
Okay, see you next week. Thanks, Tom.
All right, and that was our longest tenured analyst here, Rob Maraska, giving us the MLB update. We're joined by one of the regulars here, and that is, of course, the legendary SJLI Golden Eagle men's basketball star, 26th in school history and rebounds, also with the Level Up basketball organization. I always think of Matt Hurt with the Long Island Lightning. You're with the Level Up organization, and also, of course, he is with the Long Island Nets. He's the head coach for our Plainview JFK boys JV team, also an assistant on the varsity team. And we're also joined here by Chris Pizzea, host of the Liftoff Jets and the Talking Rivals. Liftoff Jets will play coming up here in the weekend. And guys, happy Friday, and how's everybody doing tonight?
Doing good.
Doing great, Tom. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday it is. And so let me get to some comments here. And the Brute Force, Joe Dell gives a big exclamation point. Joey Bostrom here, Brute and Chris, exclamation points. Jason Getz, we were joined by about 10 or 15 minutes ago, and he said, where's Bradley? And you're here now, so hopefully, Mr. Getz, if you have something to say, the floor will be given to you. And I did give him a shout-out. I did buy time. As they say in wrestling, you got to give somebody a hold. And I said, you be coming on, just hang on tight. And we did that here. And Joe Dell says, was up. So, gentlemen, obviously, I'm sure Justin will join us. Maybe we'll be joined by somebody else here. But, I mean, impressions, and I know Chris had a lot to say, and I'll ask the Brute Force, speaking of basketball, NBA All-Star Game. Everybody seems to be making a big joke out of it, and All-Star games in general, and I want to get your perspective on it, the Brute Force, because I know you did watch the game. I know Chris will have some funny comments on it that kind of relate to the general sports side of All-Star games. So, what did you think of this year's NBA All-Star Game, Mr. Brute Force, Brad Weiss?
It was trash. That's what I think about it. It was trash. It was horrifying. As someone said, I believe it was Jaylen Brown, it was a glorified layup line, all right? I mean, it was just brutal to watch, Tom. I mean, listen, there were some nice little highlights here and there, but was it really a basketball game? No. It was just simply, people throwing up for dunks, wide open, guys letting people just drive to the basket for I mean, it wasn't even competitive until, the end. And even then, the score was so lopsided.
I know they were up, I think, what was it, by 18 points or something like that?
Yeah, I think the previous 2 years, the score was at least close.
Very
So
close.
at the end of the game, it was competitive, and that's why we were giving it some praise. But this year it wasn't. And just to see the layup lines and wide open layup, guys just ole.
I thought you would have liked it, Brad, because that you would have loved to have played in a game like that because you weren't getting as many opportunities as St. Joe's.
Well, listen, if I was in the game, of course I'd be happy. Okay, but I'm talking as a spectator, someone who had to watch the game. I understand. I was just disappointed with the game itself. Now, when it comes to the dunk contest, thank God for Mac McClung. I mean, this guy could jump out of this guy was crazy. I mean, he was jumping from everywhere, 360 dunks. I mean, this guy was unbelievable, Mac McClung. I actually remember watching him at Texas Tech. I saw he was a good player. I saw him in the G League. So I really respected his game. For him to go in there as a G League player and win the dunk contest was pretty impressive. With that being said, the fact that we have somebody from the G League winning the contest says a lot about the NBA players that are in the contest, which my New York Knick, Jericho Sims, was a tragic embarrassment to New York City and the state of New York. I mean, he was just horrible. He decided to go over this dunk, right, with his arm in the rim and then did it a second time and thought he was going to get away with trying to rip a 50 open when he ripped it in half. I mean, this guy was a straight embarrassment. So, that was bad.
Well, usually when we talk basketball, Brad, it's usually me ripping somebody. It's now you, actually.
Oh, no, hold on. I'm not done. All right, then you go to the three-point shooting competition. I know Randall wasn't supposed to be in it, but why in the world would they select him, of all people, to go in there and embarrass himself?
About that on last week's show. Yes,
I mean, come on. I mean, he went out there. He stunk. Kevin Huerter saved him, though, by being worse than him. All right, but ultimately that was bad, although, the contest itself was competitive with Halliburton, right? Okay, that's pretty good. There's no shade on Mac McClung today, all right? No shade at all. So, and then the skills challenge. I mean, did these guys actually try to have some skills? I mean, to watch the skills contest, and the guys don't even have to make a shot, and they can just keep going. I mean, none of them can make a shot. It was embarrassing. So, in a whole sense, Tom, of All-Star Weekend, it was a little disappointing. I was hoping it'd be a little bit better. The game itself was a layup line. Even Mike Malone, the Denver coach who was coaching one of the teams, was talking about how it was just not a competitive game, not exciting to watch. So if he's saying it and he's on the sideline and he's a coach, that says a lot. And I was a little disappointed. I thought it would be a little bit better.
All right, I'll ask the guys their thoughts, and then I'm going to come back around and talk maybe what would you do differently then, because I know Chris will have something to talk about that. Let me get to a few more comments before I get Justin and Chris here. Carlos Otoro Chavez says, I need to come back from my blackout from Sportswire Fridays. Well, you're here with us now. I mean, nobody blacked you out. I mean, you're always welcome to come in. I mean, everybody's always welcome. The boys are back. Big shout out from Skulls. Skulls has become one of our favorites of late on Sportswire. And Carlos also adds, no, I will not be the new QB for the New York Jets. Could maybe throw about that in there. And of course, Skulls is from California. This year, the Lakers don't cause a riot. Okay, I guess. Knicks continue to stink it up even in the All-Star weekend, but they won tonight. I know Brad will certainly have a thought of that. And Carlos says fire Tibbs, but they ain't firing him right now. I mean, right now they ain't going to fire him. But Joe Dell also points out, which was 80s All-Star games were the best. He had Jordan, Magic, Bird, Barkley, Mailman. Was the Mailman in the 80s? Patrick Ewing, etc. And then Joe Bostrom says, the All-Star game was an embarrassment to the NBA. It was bad. Maybe I'm old school, but I wanted a little defense. All right, so I'm sure there's going to be a topic here, more so than I expected. So some people are like, well, what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, I think this is going to carry us for a while. Chris, I know you're probably in the category of some of these other guys, like a Joe Dell or Joey Bostrom, not a fan of it. So, I mean, what's the solution then? You've got some thoughts on it, and we're all ears.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a solution, but, I mean, the All-Star games in all the sports, right, are for the fans. They're not for the players. And the players really are showing you that they do not care and they don't want to be there They want nothing to do with these games, right? So what I would do, at least in the NBA, NHL, and the NFL, is forget the games. And they've already done that in the NFL, right? They're doing that, the flag football game now. But I would forget about the games totally and go more into expand the skills competitions, right? In the NBA and the NHL, even in the NFL. But maybe in the NBA, instead of having a full court game, do something like that 3-on-3 league that they have. Like pick 3 guys.
You're talking about the big 3 in the summer. Yep.
Yeah, like do something like that instead of like a full game, because the full game is not working, right? Like Brute Force just said. I mean, it's layups. There's no defense. Maybe a 3-on-3 or a 2-on-2 or something. Keep it more smaller, and maybe it'll bring out a little bit of something that the players are not doing right now, because the players do not want to be there. And it's the same thing in the NHL. The NHL, and it's hard because you're not going to play defense in the NHL because you don't want to kill a guy, and you don't want to get hurt in a meaningless game. So I get it, in the middle of the season, no less. So I get it in that sense, but they got to get more creative because nobody wants to see these games. Like, who wants to sit and watch just a guy?
Funny you said that, because I was looking at the ratings, and I'll get to Justin in a second and a couple of comments, and I was curious because obviously we cover a lot of wrestling, and it was one of the shows, it was not WWE actually, but it was one of the how can I put this for the non-wrestling fans, one of the lower tier wrestling shows, which I was surprised of actually drew more viewers than the NBA All-Star Game, which tells you that, I mean, I guess people are, to Brad's point, to Chris's point, that maybe people are tuned out of these games and they don't see the emphasis on them. I mean, maybe that's a point that is valid. I don't know.
I mean, they got to do something. They got to figure it out, because obviously the players don't even want to be there. So you got to try to make it fun. The games are just not working, right? So they got to do something. NBA, you could try the 3-on-3 tournament or something like that. Can you imagine, not that they'll do it, but can you imagine if you have like the 2 or 3 best players on each team, right? And that's your tournament, or the 2 top players of each team, and that's your tournament, right? And they play like a round robin tournament over two days, maybe. Can you do that? I don't know. But
I mean, they're there. What are they there? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they don't go back to Thursday. It used to be. In the old days, I know some guys like Joe Dell and certainly Joey Bostrom, because he's quite a bit older than me, but he'll know that in the 90s and into the mid-2000s, the game, it used to be, I think everybody would go on break Thursday. You'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and you'd come back on Tuesday. So, I mean, you could maybe do some combinations. Before I get to Justin, let me get to a few comments. Joe Dell says, the mailman was on the Jazz in the 80s. Okay, I appreciate that. I didn't know if he was like an all-star in the 80s, but that was kind of more of my reference point. Skulls says at least Shaq didn't break a backboard. No, he did. He did break a backboard. I'm pretty sure he did. He did break a backboard. It was on you. I saw it on YouTube.
Not an all-star game, but he did in a regular season game.
Well, he still broke the backboard.
Yeah,
I mean,
no doubt.
At the middle end.
Carlos Otoro Chavez says NBA All-Stars should play the gold medal basketball team with the best FIBA team, and $10 million for each player for the winning team. This will give more exposure to the players who were drafted and did not play in the U.S. or the mid-major colleges. Interesting proposal. Before I get to Justin, it's like WWE has more views than ESPN. Exactly my point. Listen, I mean, I think the All-Star Game this year, I'm pretty sure of it, had the lowest views in history. And, Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views draw far exceed that. And it doesn't cost the kind of money to these networks to put these shows on, because they develop it all in-house. So I think that's the point that I made. In fact, Skulls, I'm pretty sure the NBA games this season, like I pointed out, some mid-tier wrestling shows are drawing bigger ratings than the NBA this year. And that's certainly a big concern, I'm sure, for Turner and ESPN. But Justin, I mean, we've heard what the Brute Force and Chris have said. I mean, were you into the game? Would you like to see something different? I mean, what's your impressions on this?
The game was total. The game was absolute trash. I mean, it was the worst thing I've ever seen. And the only thing I could stand to watch all weekend was the slam dunk contest. The skills competition, the 3-point shootout was a joke. The dunk contest was good, especially with Mac McClung. And the game, Thank God I was at the Devils game on Sunday night because that was just an absolute travesty. I was seeing the highlights all over the place. It was just an absolute joke. And Chris is right. No, they don't care about the game, so they make a complete mockery out of it. It's embarrassing, honestly. It really is.
All right, let me ask the Brute Force a question on this, and maybe we'll come back to some of these guys. Joey Bostrom, I have a feeling, is going to say something toward this. So, Brad, obviously, you have a couple different thoughts, I'm sure. What would you do differently? The Brute Force is now the Adam Silver, and he's got the magic wand to do something. What do you do to make the game different? Do you put home court advantage on for East and West? Do you do something out of the blue? Do you do what they're trying to do with the Pro Bowl, what Chris is saying? What do you do?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't dislike Chris's proposal that he had with the 3-on-3. It's not a bad idea for sure. But yeah, let me put it on. It's actually funny. When I was commissioning my fantasy football team league, they called me Bradham Silver. So maybe Bradham Silver.
Did you call yourself Bradham Silver?
No, they call me Bradham Silver. So I want to be clear that I'm going to put on my Bradham Silver hand.
All right, give you that.
Let me just say this first of all. Number one. All right, this was a good point that I heard when I was watching, my normal shows. When you talk about, the players in the off season, right? They work really hard to get better, and they work out on their own. And they work, when you have an all-star game, right, in the middle of your season, right, where you have paid fans coming to watch you play, you don't work as hard, but you work that hard in the off season when no one's watching you, and that's when you could take a little bit of a break. But you don't do it for the fans. That to me is just egregious that you can't do it for one night. Then you have charities out there. The one thing that I thought the NBA has done a good job of is putting money towards charities for who wins and who loses.
Yes, I agree.
You want to put on a better show for those charities? There was like a tie or two where they had to split the money. Wouldn't you want to play a little harder to win it for that charity? Something. So, listen, I do like Chris's idea. I do think that's something that could come up. But, the game itself, the other thing I like to say is Bradham Silver, all right? Let me say this, all right? This point was also made, okay? The cities that the games are going on in, Tom. The NBA has not exactly been picking great cities recently. You got Utah, you got Indiana, right? You got all these small markets, right? Well, the NFL.
You can't keep going to New York, Los Angeles every year.
No, but what you should consider doing is mixing it up. So maybe like a small market, then a big market, then a small. Now they're going through all these cities, right, that maybe aren't as attractive for players to go and play an all-star game, right?
Utah, it's a fair point. Utah, the weather's terrible there. It's kind of out of nowhere. I know they're a rabid basketball franchise.
I'm just bringing up points that I've heard about, different things. But it doesn't. All these different
things.
A
city that doesn't have an NBA team.
Yeah, that too. You attract new fans at least, maybe. But you have to attract new fans by putting out a decent product. And if you don't do that, then you ain't attracting no one. So I think I think to Chris's point, 100% I agree that they should expand and definitely improve that skills competition. Like I said, one of the skills competitions, you literally did not have to make the shot. You just needed to attempt 3 shots. Okay, the passing game, you literally had a pass where the circle was humongous. Like anyone could pass it in that damn circle. Make it smaller, for God's sake. So there was, make a little more challenging.
This is why I watched WWE Elimination Chamber, because I thought about it, like, should I peek in? And I'm like, I have a feeling that the skills, I did watch the All-Star game. That I did watch. But I did have a feeling that the skills competition on the Saturday part wasn't going to be too memorable. And Friday they play the celebrity game, which they play before the rookie versus the second-year players game. And that was like, I was no way interested in that. But let me get to some more comments here first. Carlos Otoro Chavez says the NBA has been mediocre since after the COVID-19 Disney tournament. We're talking about that's the tournament after when the Lakers won the championship. Yeah, I did like the COVID tournament, though. I have to say I did enjoy watching that. But then again, we were at a point, Brad, if you recalled, all we were talking about was like NBA horse. We were talking about.
I think that's what Carlos is kind of referring to, though. We were talking about horse. We were talking about, Zoom call dunk contest. It was just ridiculous. It was horrible.
Hey, what about doing it at like a college venue? Would that do anything? Like a different kind of a?
How about an outdoor thing? How about somewhere outdoor? Somewhere warm, outdoor?
Have to be in a warm weather, city, obviously, because of the time. It's February.
Well, I mean, you've got what? In warm, let's see, it's warm in what? Southern California, right, would be warm. I would think Texas would be okay. Certain parts of Texas would be warm. Let me think.
Any local place too, not even like
Phoenix,
a big, like
Phoenix
a local.
would be warm, right? Phoenix would be warm.
Yeah,
Phoenix, South Florida.
South Florida. That was my next one. I mean, anybody for that? Before I get some more comments. Anybody like an outdoor game? Maybe.
Nah.
No. Well, what I'd say is, as Bradham Silver, I don't think that'll ever happen because.
Or was it college basketball that played on the ship or something like that?
Yeah, college basketball.
College, right?
They played a game, yeah. But as Bradham Silver, I can tell you right now that is not happening, and it's mainly because of health and safety things. I mean, they worry about and stuff like that. I mean, again, I think it's a good idea. I just know it's not going to happen. So that's all I'm going to say.
I mean, I have more comments. Let me try to work through these comments. Carlos Otoro Chavez says, I did see some more players around All-Star weekend than in regular games. Do they load manage for that weekend?
Oh, that's another topic. Oh, boy.
Yeah, Barkley, right? Barkley came out and said something about that.
That's another topic. Can I ask a question real quick before we continue?
Sure.
And it's the best question of the night. Where's John Gonzalez's opinion on this? Because this is
I think he heard I think he heard like Rob Maraska, and we love Rob obviously, but I think he heard like Rob Maraska talking about like the top 8 Mets in the 100 Major League Baseball 100 this year, and he's like, well, no NFL yet. So I guess maybe that's what he was wondering. I don't know. I mean, we love Rob obviously, but he probably heard the when we're talking about
doesn't excuse John Gonzalez. Where is he? We want to hear his opinion on this.
Right.
I'm sure
he might have an idea. You never know.
Anthony Finkel, I could told me because I was with him Sunday night during the All-Star game. He said he fell asleep during last week's show, and I have a feeling he fell asleep again this week's show because he's doing his Titan Money Machines business. So he's all about making the money. So I could tell you that's where he probably is. Joe Dell, though, says, preach on, Brute. He loves it. Joey Bostrom says, bring back the East versus West. Don't turn off the clock in the fourth quarter. Take away the three-point shot. The draft at the beginning of the game took forever. Yeah, the draft did take forever. I mean, I will give you that the draft
I don't like
did.
The draft either.
And Carlos says the WNBA played in a U.S. Open venue.
I don't remember that.
That must have been a long time ago. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Didn't the Lakers play outdoors for a game? I'm almost
an exhibition game. I think an exhibition
game.
Wasn't it with Kobe? Didn't Kobe play outside once? Or
I think years ago. It's years ago. Yeah, I think I asked the question. What about an outdoor game in a warm weather? I think somebody brought it up. Maybe you're playing European players. Would anybody be interested in that? The NHL tried that kind of country versus country for a while in the All-Star game.
Would they really? But the whole thing is would they want to play? Like, would it still be a layup fest like Brute called it? Like would it
probably would be?
I think so.
Yeah.
So what's the answer? Have the All-Star game after the NBA Finals like the NFL does with the Pro Bowl? What's exactly...
I think that'll make it worse.
Really wouldn't do it. After that, they'd be like, you know what?
Yeah, the
ratings. Yeah. It's interesting. Thanks to the Crack staff for giving us this, and thank you to Joe Dell, who's tuned in as always, and shout out, of course, to his wife, Laura Dell, who runs the Wrestling Roundtable group on Facebook. And, I mean, what's the answer then? I mean, I guess if you're looking for something, I mean... I don't know. What's the answer? Anything further toward that? I mean, Joey Bostrom, while we're doing that, says, after the game, I had to watch the 2001 All-Star game to feel better about myself. Was it that bad? We had a couple. Listen, there was an All-Star game I watched. The 2019 game was good. I thought the 2019. Remember the game, Brad? I watched it. Joe Rosass's house. That was a real game.
There were a couple recently that were decently good.
I think it was decided on the last play, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the last play it was decided in terms of who won. Now, there's been some okay games. I mean, I don't think it's been all bad. I don't think it's been all bad the last 7
years. This year was just brutal. It was just brutal.
So you don't want it after the NBA Finals, right? You don't want that. You don't. Would you want to see maybe European players? Would you want to see people from colleges play in the game against some of these pros? Would you want to see fans pick people that they want rather than who gets picked or something like that, something different? Would you want anything? Any ideas? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, none of those proposals are pushing Adam Silver right now to be excited. I mean, they're ideas, they're ideas, but I don't think any of those proposals are going to really go far. I mean, playing European players, I just don't know how that would work logistically. Also, with when they play and when their leagues are.
Well, Europe is going on. I mean, you saw John Petroselli, who we know very well. His season just ended not too long ago.
It'll be a little tricky. Picking players, we all know that would be a disaster because some random players would get picked into the game that would never deserve to be there. So it's a tough spot for the NBA. Like we said, it wasn't too long ago that this experiment actually looked better. It was just this year was brutally bad. So I think you got to hope for an improvement next year. And if anything, I think the first idea that has to come to mind is something like Chris, some sort of tournament, right, with a different format, maybe 3-on-3 or something like that, to interest the fans a little bit more. But I don't think that any of those outside proposals, like going outside or European people playing, like I don't know if any of those.
Well, I do have Chris, and thank you, Chris, for giving this to us before I get to Joey Bostrom. There actually has been 4 games in NBA history that have been played outdoors. The first one was in 1972, which I didn't know, between the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks at Hiram Bothran Stadium, which I think that was where the Expos played in their 2-year experiment in Puerto Rico. That I recall correctly. And then the next game that took place was in 2008 in Indian Wells, which is in California, which is the tennis place, which I think sort of partially is what Carlos had mentioned. And that was when the game was at a low of 64 degrees. And that was between, against the Suns and Nuggets. And also a few players did miss the game due to injuries, Brad had pointed out. Also 2009, the Suns had met the Warriors there, but weather was a problem again. And then the third game was played between the Suns and Mavericks again. Grant Hill actually led all scorers with 16 points. Wow, Grant Hill was still hanging around in 2010. And then, he hung around a few more years after that, I remember. And then Carlos is right. The WNBA has played 1 game outside, and it was at the U.S. Open. But in 2008, it was the Liberty Outdoor Classic, and it was actually on TNT. It was between the Indiana Fever and the New York Liberty. The Fever had won 71-59, July 19th, 2008, which is right before the U.S. Open Tennis Center there, so the tournament itself. And so those are some fair points. A couple of comments here from Joey Bostrom. The 2001 game was the best one ever. East came back from 21 down in the fourth quarter. Allen Iverson was the MVP. That was the year that he scored like 31 points a game, right? And the Sixers went to the NBA Finals, if I'm not mistaken, Joey.
Yes.
And Carlos says, make the game have AAU rules. Brad Weiss, you know AAU rules better than most people. Would you want to see that? I see you shaking.
What are AAU rules? What are those rules?
Yeah, what are the rules? Because there are not many. I mean, that's one of the problems with AAU is there are not enough rules. Basically just a free for all out there.
Do you know what that reminds me of? When I was in junior high school in Brooklyn, we would have gym class and we would play basketball. This is when I went to junior high school, and we would play, and they would call it jail rules. And basically there was no rules. Basically, like they could push you, they could punch you to get the ball, and that was kind of like.
I coach AAU, and there's not. The rules are very slim, and even if there are rules, the rules aren't always followed. So to answer that question, no. I don't want to see those rules. I think I know where he's coming from. Maybe he's saying we should just play a game with not a lot of rules, let these guys just go at it. But I think that would make it worse because then these guys won't want to play even more because they don't want to be physical. They don't want to, again, it's all about, health and safety, for them.
Well, especially because if you think about it, what are we roughly about 1/3 of the season left? And a lot of these teams, they're looking at it from their standpoint, and, they need these players, whether in a playoff race, a play-in race. I know Brad hates the play-in, but for overall, let's say the top of the standings for that home court advantage, things like that. So it's kind of a two-way street here. And obviously also I would like to mention that Joey Bostrom also mentions that in 2001, I was correct. The 76ers had lost to the Lakers in the NBA Finals, if I recall correctly. I think the Sixers won the first game of the series, and then the Lakers won the next four. And the crack staff also did want to remind me, though, that while the All-Star game ratings were down, TNT is actually in the regular season seeing their highest ratings since pre-COVID. So, I mean, people are interested in the game. They're just not interested in the All-Star game. And that kind of matches what Chris said a little bit, because if you think about, let's say, the NFL as an example, right? People love the NFL, right? And the NFL ratings are still very good. They're very consistent. But the Pro Bowl has lacked. I mean, so if you think about it from those standpoints, the two of the major sports, those are fair points. And we are on Sportswire Radio. We are speaking all things related to the world of sports with three of my guys. That is Justin Gianelli of the Baseball Banter Show. We just played the Baseball Banter Show earlier today. We'll have it throughout the rotation in the weekend. Chris Pizzea wearing a Roberto Clemente sweater. Very nice sweater there. Give you credit on that. You definitely needed it today. He is also the host of the Talking Rivals and the Liftoff Jet Show. And, of course, the Brute Force Brad Weiss, the legendary SJLI Golden Eagle 26th all-time in school history and rebounds. He is also a coach with the Level Up Basketball Organization. He's with the Long Island Nets. He's the head coach of our Plainview JFK Hawks boys JV team and assistant on the varsity team. And my name, you know by now, is the Reverend Tom Bryce. I am the host of the Sports Report and the owner of Sportswire Radio. And if you like what you hear from us, continue to give us a like on Facebook at Sportswire Radio. Also, YouTube, subscribe to our page. Got a lot of new subscribers the last few weeks. We've got, I think, 20 new subscribers in the last 2 weeks. That's why you see the views are up. And also on Facebook, we have a lot of new people out there. So I appreciate all of the support in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. And back to the comments here for the guys. And Carlos says people want to watch Shaq and Barkley acting a fool on TNT. Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah. And I have to say, last night, what I did enjoy, I don't know if you were up, Brad, but they had, because Creed 3 is coming out, they had Michael B. Jordan trying to see if he could shoot more free throws than Kenny Smith did. I don't know if you caught that at the end of the
I think I might have seen a highlight of that.
He wasn't. Michael B. Jordan wasn't as good of a shooter as he was an actor. It was put it that way. And
what about? Here's another idea. What about getting some of the legends involved?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Not in the game, obviously, but maybe like in the 3-point shootout or something like that.
Didn't they try that years ago, though? Wasn't that years ago? Didn't they try, do you remember, Brad, when they did the skills contest on the weekends? Joey Bostrom and Carlos Arturo Chavez probably remember this. But didn't they, for a while, do certain skills contest? I remember seeing Kenny Smith one year, I think. I'm trying to think, Dan Marley, Kevin Johnson. I'm trying to think. This has to have been maybe 10 or so years ago. Didn't they try that at one point, Brad? I feel like they did.
Yeah.
Alan Houston was in it one year.
They've tried different things. I know that a few years ago they had that joke of a atrocity of Kevin Hart against Draymond Green in the 3-point shooting competition to try to get viewers and joke. I mean, that was an atrocity. So they have tried bringing in celebrities and different things like that. And by the way, that's the one game we haven't mentioned. That game is one of the best games you see is the celebrity game. That game is actually not bad.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
It's not bad. I mean, we were wondering about DK Metcalf, who looked like he could jump from half court and make a dunk.
Well, can I point out, because everything has to be on Sportswire about wrestling. The Miz, who, by the way, famous wrestling star, he played pretty good in that game, by the way. I have to say.
He did. Definitely give him a shout out, for sure.
He's definitely doing really well in his life, because if you've seen his wife, he's definitely one of those people that is punching way above his weight class. Just look up his wife, and you'll say, yep, you know what? You got that one. But I do have some more comments for everybody here. Carlos says, Rose to Phoenix for peanuts. What say you guys? What do you guys think about that? You have Justin and Chris. I see. I'm not Chris, Justin and the Brute Force. I see you guys. Before I get to more All-Star comments, anything on that?
I don't see that as a bad thing. I mean, the one thing I've been mentioning with Phoenix is depth. What do they have coming off the bench after their starting lineup? And I think they're starting to address some of those holes. I think they are starting to address them, though. They, if they get a guy like Rose, I know they're still looking at the buyout market for other players. So I do think that would be a decent move, just to have a piece off the bench and build some sort of depth that you could rely on. And Derrick Rose, who wasn't playing bad with the New York Knicks before Tom Thibodeau took him out of the rotation. He just took him out for the younger players, which thank God he finally did. We've been waiting for him to play younger players. So listen, I do think this is not a bad thing. I mean, like you said, it's for peanuts. It's nothing. Take a chance. Why not?
All right. Any thought on that, Justin, real quick, before I get to a couple more comments?
Yeah, I think that would be a good fit for Derrick Rose. I mean, right now they're currently on ESPN, and right now they're running Cameron Payne as their backup point guard behind Chris Paul. So, I mean, yeah, obviously, like Brad said, we're looking at the buyout market with the trade deadline having passed. It's not the worst idea in the world.
All right, let me get to a couple of more comments. And Joey Bostrom says, I believe to what I had to say. Yep, they tried at the skills challenge in terms of the legends, because I feel like we did see the legends there. And Carlos Ochoa Chavez says 50th anniversary. They had them do a few things. Are we talking about the NBA 50? Because that was a while ago. That was it had to have been in the 90s, I want to say, right? Because the league started in like 1947 or so, 1946, something like that. So that had to have been in the late 90s. So that's a while ago. Now we would just have passed on the 75th anniversary. And Joey Bostrom says they could use Rose's leadership. And standings here currently, before we move on to other topics in the Western Conference, Denver is in first place in clear control. Grizzlies 6 games back, and the Kings on the verge of breaking that longest playoff drought in sports. They are in third place at 33-25. Clippers 33-28. The aforementioned Suns in fifth. Mavericks 32-29, which continues that logjam of the Pelicans at 30-30. Timberwolves 31-31. Jazz 30-31, who held the All-Star game this year. The Warriors, who I just cannot figure out this year, 29-30. They're in the 10th spot behind a free-falling number of teams. You've got the Thunder there, 28-30. Blazers, 28-31. Lakers, 28-32. So those teams are all separated by a game and a half. In fact, if you go from 7 to 12, they're all separated by 2 games. And if you go from 4th to 13th, you're only separated by 4.5. In the Eastern Conference, Celtics and Bucks separated by half a game. Sixers, 3 games back. And Brad, 13-game winning streak from the Milwaukee Bucks. They have been the talk of the NBA right now. Cleveland has lost 3 in a row. They have lost some ground a little bit. The Nets, 34-25, and those New York Knicks, the Brute Force, though in time, we'll get to that in a little while. They're in 6th, 34-27. Another win tonight, 4 in a row. The Heat, 3 in a row. They're in a free-for-all. Hawks, 30-30. Raptors, well, like they played a little bit better. We talked about them at the deadline. They made a nice move there with Poeltl. Had 21-18, I think, last night. I was watching a little bit of that against the Magic. And 28-31 is the Wizards, who we saw just earlier. Bulls, 27-33. Got a blowout win over the Nets, unfortunately, tonight. Pacers and the Magic, and then it's kind of everybody else. So those are some of the standings here at the moment. And also here, Anthony Finkel, big shout out to him. He's tuned in.
Oh, he's up.
I'm surprised he's up because I thought he said he was sleeping. But hey, that's okay. What's up, fellas? Joey Bostrom also wants to tell me 1997 was the 50th year anniversary. Yeah, I thought that was the case. And Carlos Otoro Chavez said, looking like that old Lakers team that got beat by the Pistons. And then Joey Bostrom also says Randall had a great game. So you know what? Let's do it early. Because I know at the end of the show, Brad, we're going to talk about SJC to kind of end things. So let's bring it on the screen because you know what? I did mention it. And before I move on to baseball, get a few thoughts on spring training. Those New York Knicks, the Brute Force, Brad Weiss, they do have 4 wins in a row. They are no longer in play-in position. And it looks like right now, you know what? They're on a run, and it's that time. It's Dolan time. So the Brute Force, Brad Weiss, fire away.
Tom, this is going to be a rough segment for me because, you said fire away. Normally that means I go crazy. I start talking about what the Knicks can't do,
anyway.
how bad they are.
Listen, remember a couple years ago during COVID, you were going crazy when they were over 500. Yeah, why not?
You know what? This is what I'll say, all right? We could still stay seated, but, we can get on our tippy toes. We can start getting a little excited, all right? Because I actually think the New York Knicks are showing us that they can be a team that does not participate in the play-in. They got a nice win today. Once again, they were down, but they came back. Julius Randle had 46 points. He's playing like an all-star, and every time I say he should be traded, he keeps playing better. So let me say it again. All right, he should be traded, all right? But he's going to keep playing better, I guess. He can't get traded, obviously, now because the trade deadline, as Justin said, has passed. But on a serious note, he's playing all-star basketball. He's been terrific. Brunson, who didn't even have a great game today, had a big layup at the end of the game to put them up by 3, I believe. And listen, they just as a team are playing very well. You know, the Josh Hart trade looks very good right now. He's
haven't lost since Josh Hart became a Knick, Brad. They haven't lost.
Yeah, no, he's playing good basketball. I mean, you got guys like, R.J. Barrett didn't even finish the game today. I mean, they finished with guys like Quickly, who's been playing well, Grimes, who's been playing well. So they got a lot of answers, Tom. I think that the Knicks are showing us things, and I know that Carlos Arturo Chavez said fire Tibbs. All right, but right now he's coaching really well, and I can't say he's not, because they're winning games, they're competing. And listen, Justin Gianelli's Nets, after a really, really rough loss today, and really just, I don't know what happened to their offense. And we all know that the offense is the biggest question with the Nets. Like, where are they getting it from? If the Nets look like this more often than not, the New York Knicks might, and I cannot even believe I'm going to say this, might finish as the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference.
I'll tell you what, they ain't far behind the 4th seed either. I wouldn't say they're that far behind Cleveland.
They're far behind the Cavaliers. So yeah, I'm starting to, change my tone a little bit, Tom. Always, negative. I'm starting to get positive again. The New York Knicks are impressing me. The New York Knicks are playing good basketball, and they're not, a pushover. They're competing. They're going. And I want to see, by the way, a big game coming up on Monday. They're playing the Celtics at the Garden.
Where you going there?
I'd really like to see how they compete in that game, because they did give the Celtics a good game in Boston before the All-Star break.
They beat them in Boston. Anthony Finkel and I were watching that game. That was the second to last time I went to Dublin.
That right now is the best team in the Eastern Conference. So, listen, again, I'm optimistic right now in the Knicks. I so badly want to get on James Dolan, but right now the Knicks are doing the right things. They're 7 games over 500, and right now they're looking really good to not participate in that play-in tournament.
I think the word to use before we get to some more comments is cautiously optimistic, meaning that you're confident, but cautiously optimistic. Kind of like how I viewed the Mets season. That's like you, cautiously optimistic, because the schedule is still tough. No, the schedule is tough.
No, it is.
We have the Nets on Wednesday, have Boston. Listen, isn't even the Pelicans is going to be no pushover, and you're going to have the Kings. You're going to be on the road with the Clippers and the Lakers, and you're going to have Denver still. You got some tough games. So there's no question that the Knicks have a lot of tough games coming up here. And let me get to some more comments here as we finished out Dolan time, and certainly a rather tame, one of the more tame Dolan times here. I think the Brute Force has had a very, very long time here. Joey Bosham also wants to remind me Mitchell Robinson came back tonight.
That's true as well.
Carlos Arturo Chavez would like to add coaching, while Tibbs is just playing younger players, which he should have done.
I mentioned that earlier. I said that, he finally decided to play younger players, and it's paying dividends. Thank God he finally figured that out.
All right, and before I get to baseball here, which I want to talk about baseball, because spring training, obviously, season is starting, and if you don't need players, cut them and get players that will play. Well, I mean, that's like what any team should do. So those are some fair points here, and it is seeming like, gentlemen, now, since we are 5 weeks from today, is the start of the Major League Baseball season. And it looks like here pitchers and catchers have started, and spring training has started a little bit today. Rob Maraska was referring to it. And I have to ask you, gentlemen, are you finding a way to squeeze some time in to check some scores, maybe watch a baseball game somewhere now that spring training has started finally?
Absolutely. I'm desperate for
watch a couple innings tomorrow.
What's that?
I'll maybe watch a couple innings of a spring training game tomorrow for the Mets.
Well, Brad, I'm sure you're going to be out in a gym somewhere. I would imagine, right? So
I will say, though, I did watch the first couple innings of the inter-squad game today, and I did like what I saw from Joey Lucchesi. He looked good.
That's what Rob Maraska was saying. He was saying he was very excited about Joey Lucchesi, a guy that we haven't seen in a while. So I guess baseball is back, and I know, Chris, you wanted to say a couple different things about the some of the rules change, because I heard Rob Maraska riffing on it. I know you were saying in the Sportswire Radio group that we have on Twitter that you had a few thoughts on it, and I'll get some of these guys' thoughts on it as well after they piggyback off you.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people hate them, but I actually like them. I think.
Tell me why.
I think the game has gotten so. I can't think of the right word. I'm going to say lazy. Over the last decade or so, it's just gotten, it's just taken so long to game. It's getting, I don't want to say boring, because it's not boring to me, but the game is it's gotten too slow. And I'm not even worried about how long the game is. You know, people are like, oh, they want to shorten it by 20 minutes. I really don't care how long the game is, but the pace of the game is so slow. So I think now with the pitch clock, it's going to speed the game up, at least in that sense. I don't care if it still goes 3 hours. That doesn't bother me. But the pace of the game, it's going to be much better. So I like it in that sense. And I think it's also going to bring back the strategy part of baseball. I think in the past decade with the shifts and, you know, I just, you don't see strategy as much as you used to from, say, 20, 30 years ago. It's just not there anymore, right? Because all the batters are up there. It's either strikeout, home run, or walk. That's most of your, you know, the results of a batter. So at least now you're probably going to see, you know, a little bit more offense. You're going to see more stolen bases because of the, you know, the throw over. You can only throw over twice. So I think you're going to see more, you know, just a more up-tempo game and something that we're lacking in baseball for years. And I think in that sense, it's going to help. I at first I thought, you know what, the throw over only 2 times is going to, I didn't like that, but it makes sense if you got the pitch clock, because then a pitcher's going to just throw over just to stop the pitch clock if he wants to, you know, as many times as he wants. So obviously they have to limit that. So 2 times seems really short, but it is what it is. The ghost runner or whatever, the extra runner in the extra innings, yeah, that sucks. But I understand why they're doing it, right? Because they don't want a 15-inning game on a Wednesday night that nobody, you know, that everybody.
Yeah, 7 o'clock there. You think about here in New York, right? For all of us from the Northeast, you know, the weather it's not that great. And we've had a great winter, but it's still to sit there at a ballpark, 7 o'clock first pitch, and a game is, let's say it's 50 degrees outside or 45 degrees. It's choppy out there, and the game goes on and on and
it
on.
It sucks.
You know,
April and May. You know, maybe in the summer, but even in the summer, you know, like people want to get home because they got work the next day. You know, you're not staying.
That's always been my, you know, that's always been my drag about going. And that's why I really don't go to baseball games, admittedly, is because you got to sit there, you got to be outside, you don't know what the weather conditions are, and then you have to get home. And then, you know, if you're like somebody like me who lives in an outer borough that's kind of far flung, you're talking about going to Citi Field or the Yankee Stadium. If I'm going to drive, it's going to take me upwards to 2 hours. If I'm on public transportation, it's still going to take me an hour and a half, but I got to sit with people. I got to wait. It becomes an experience.
For an extra inning game, imagine you're getting home at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and then guess what? You got to wake up the next morning for work. So I can understand.
I mean, in a lot of cases, because I'm a newspaper carrier,
right? Even earlier,
there's no waking up. So it's like, you have to really think about that. You know,
I understand that rule. I don't like it. I still don't like it, but I understand why they're doing it. So for whatever it is, but at least they're not doing it in the playoffs. But all the other rules I do like. I think that's going to help the game. I think the game's going to be a much more, you know, the pace of the game is going to be much quicker.
I would like it to be a little quicker, and I'll ask Justin and Brad in a second on that, because I do remember when my brother was here, he was a Mets fan. We would watch some of these games. It was late in the season, and they were just dragging. I mean, we're talking like 11:30, a regular season game would end on a Tuesday night, and it was, you think about it. Well, what if I was there? And I mean, for you, Justin, before I get to some more comments, what do you think on the new rules? Do you agree with Chris? Do you see things differently? Give me your perspective.
Yeah, overall, I'm pretty in favor of all these rules. The only one that Chris brought up that I would kind of slightly alter would be the ghost runner. I don't mind it so much, but I would say start the ghost runner after the 12th inning. I would let the 10th and 11 be natural. And because a lot of these games are ending in the 10th inning most nights anyway. So if you go natural for 2 innings in extra innings and then start it in the 12th inning, game's not going to go past 12, 13 innings, and with the new pitch clock, the game being a little bit faster, it's still not going to be a super long game. I do think it's going to help with the pace of play, and it's going to really put notice on the batter to get in the batter's box, because you have to be in the batter's box with 8 seconds left of that 15-second pitch clock. So it's really going to speed things up. Another thing, the shift being legislated out. I know that there's going to be loopholes. Like you're gonna put your shortstop as close to second base as possible, just on the left side of the infield, and vice versa with the second baseman. So there's going to be ways to like loophole around it, but you can't load up three infielders to one side, and batting averages should go up. I would think batting averages go up, and then with the two disengagements, stepping off or throwing over. Look, I mean, it is going to lead to more stolen bases, even though if you take too big of a lead and you go for that third pickoff the pitcher has to get you out, or if he doesn't, then that's when a balk is called. Plus you got the bigger bases as well, and I read something that last year in the minors, it reduced injuries significantly. Base path injuries. So that's another good thing. So I think all in all, these rules are going to be pretty solid, and I think we're gonna get adjusted to the pitch clock fairly quickly.
All right, before I get to the brute force, let me get to a bunch of comments here. First, let's get to Carlos Arturo Chavez. Tomorrow's first game. Teams playing other teams, not inter-squad. Carlos Arturo Chavez says, keep telling you about Joey Lucchesi. I like how he put Lucchesi and how he spelled it. TV media corporations want a defined time of gameplay. Now, I actually kind of agree with that because I don't think that, let's say, ESPN, Fox, Turner has Tuesday night games, and
yes,
let's say even Peacock, which has a Sunday afternoon package, right, at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock, actually. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they want games that go for 4 hours because
they probably don't.
Yeah, they don't. I don't think they want it. I don't think they want a certain block of time because if you look at the other sports, right, the NBA game, despite some of the stuff, I mean, regular season ratings are up, and those games, if you go there in person or watch on TV, they're generally 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah.
The NHL game, if you go to an NHL game in person, at most, it's 2.5 hours.
Yep.
The NFL is a little different because to me, it's only 18 weeks of the year, 17 games, and that's a little bit of a different feel toward it. But I mean, for you, the brute force, I mean, obviously some different rules changes after hearing what the guys say. I mean, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, I'm in mostly agreement with most of the guys' take. I mean, I don't really have a problem with any of them. I do wonder how this pitch clock is going to go. I heard Rob Moroska say that Manny Machado today.
Yes, we're talking about that. What the with the
didn't get in the box in time, whatever. I mean, how is this going to go? I mean, and also there's going to be situations where managers are going to get thrown out because of how the pitch clock is administered in certain situations. Like, will it start on time? Will it start too early? I'm curious to see how that works. And also with pitchers, we've complained for years about these pitches that take forever.
Oh, my God. And the Mets have a bunch of them. The Mets, listen, Steve Traxel, the human rain delay they used to call him. And, I mean, Tom Glavine was slow, too, if you remember him as a Met. I mean, the Mets have had a bunch of them. Zach Wheeler would take forever. I mean.
Yeah, that's a big adjustment for some of these pitchers. So I'm actually curious to see how some of them make the adjustment with the pitch clock and how it affects their game also. Also, Justin mentioned, batting average going up. Well, that's also going to probably lead to ERAs going up. I think that, the low ERAs are going to be tough to get now because, there's no shift to stop a Vogelback from hitting it from the right side.
Rob was mentioning Vogelback. He kind of feels like Vogelback might actually be a big benefiter of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be people that benefit from it. There's going to be people that don't benefit from it. So, listen, you got guys like Mark Canha, right, saying that all offseason he's trying to get stronger so he can hit some more home runs. Well, yeah, because he probably doesn't have the same gaps anymore that maybe he had earlier. So I do understand that. Now, this is where I get upset. All right. This is where I get upset because, I'm a young guy. All right. I do have some old baseball in me and I like certain things.
Well, your father was a professional baseball player. So
yeah,
you hear a lot from your father.
I like some of the things that, are just what is known in baseball. And what is not known in baseball, Tom Bryce, is a damn golf cart taking you from the bullpen to the damn pitching mound. Listen, I've heard that because of all these damn rules with the pitch clock, that there's going to be more golf carting going on. All right. Get the heck out of here with the golf cart. All right, you hustle on the field. All right,
Edward Diaz come out to the trumpets in the golf cart.
Yeah, like you're gonna come up with the golf cart now? Really? Like I don't want to see the damn golf cart. All right, if the golf cart becomes a popular thing because of all this nonsense, I am not going to be happy. There's a tradition of pitchers coming out of the bullpen, right? There's their walk-up music coming on, and they're jogging in, right? That has to change now because of a pitch clock, so people are going to use a damn golf cart to come out. That better not happen. That is the one thing that I want to talk about, because the rest of the things are self-explanatory. I understand. You know, I know Rob Maraska is not happy about, the extra inning rule, and I understand that.
Rob Maraska was probably one of those guys like, Chris will know what I'm talking about, like a Bob Costas, where he probably wasn't a fan of the wild card being implemented. I mean, he's probably, Maraska might be a true baseball.
I'm old school too, but I understand. I mean, and if like you said, the game just drags. It just drags.
No, there's games that. I mean, I'll be honest, and I said it before, and people have asked me when I was going to Islander games, would you want to go to a baseball game? And I would always say, well, I mean, if I have to get there, I have to leave my house at 4 o'clock. I get there before 7 o'clock, right? So I'm hopefully get there by 6. If it's an 85-degree day, I sit there. Then if the game ends at 11 o'clock, I have to travel back home. And I don't get home till, like you said, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I have to get up for a few hours. Do I really want to go through that type of experience? And I think a lot of people with baseball, I think, kind of ponder that. And even watching a game on TV, baseball, Brad, I'm sure you could vouch for this, or, maybe some of the younger people that listen to Sportswire, like some of your players you coach, to sit there for 4 hours, the attention span's not there. I mean, to sit there for 4 hours.
For most. I mean, there are some, obviously, traditionalists that will want to sit there for a whole game and don't mind it. But the majority, and also for the younger generation, don't. And that's why I think, as much as I don't really like the extra inning rule, I understand why it's there. And I think that for the younger generation right now, I think it's better that that's implemented, especially in the regular season. Especially with how many games you play in the regular season.
A lot of games, there's a lot of games.
It makes sense. So that's why, again, larger bases, fine. Shifts going off, fine. The 2 throwovers, fine. I mean, you see these guys throwing it over like 40,000 times, and you want, everyone's booing in the crowd over and over again. Just throw the damn ball already, all right? So I actually like that. So, all those things being said, the last thing I'll complain about, which is completely not related, all right, but I have to say it, all right? Starting on Monday, Tom Bryce, there's actually a major change on Long Island to the Long Island Railroad schedule because they're going into Penn Station and Grand Central now. So there's a change in the schedule. So hopefully that does not affect, right, the train times. Even though the train times weren't that great to begin with, going to Citi Field, but hopefully it affects it in the right way, so that the changes in the game and also the game being fast and being quicker. Hopefully the trains are there for that.
Let me ask you a silly question, because I think all three of you are Long Islanders, and I don't know who takes the train and who doesn't to whether it's Yankee Stadium or Citi Field. But do they run express, the Long Island Railroad, from Long Island to whether it's Citi Field or Manhattan?
No, I mean, so I'm on. So everybody's probably on a different rail line. I'm on the Long Beach line. That goes down towards Long Beach.
Okay.
So I have to pick, it runs every hour, and then I have to change it Woodside to get the Mets Willis Point for Citi Field. So it's not always the best, but, because there's usually for me a gap of waiting at Woodside for the Port Washington train.
What about you, Brad?
Yeah, so I'm on I either could take the Huntington or the Ronkonkoma branch.
I thought you were closer to Huntington. I thought that's where you were closer to, right? Huntington?
Well, so Ronkonkoma and Huntington both travel through Hicksville. So Hicksville's the station that I go on. So both train, which is pretty cool because you get more options. But, same thing, you got to get to Woodside, transfer. But I've had these nights, Tom, where the game ends. It actually ends at 10 o'clock, and you still don't get home till midnight because you have to wait for the next train to show up. So I'm hoping that, with maybe these adjustments, to the game also comes with the adjustments to the rail. Maybe they collide and we get a better.
This is for other reasons why I'm not going to a baseball game anytime soon.
But the one thing that's good is,
all right, and I'll ask Chris the same question in a second.
The one thing that's good is when you're leaving Citi Field, they'll always, especially when there's packed crowds, they'll always toss a few extra trains.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Point. So you could get to Woodside,
right?
But then it's the overlap of waiting at Woodside. Okay, now I got to go back to the Long Beach line, and I got to get off at
that's the problem.
East Rockaway stop.
I've had some long nights on the Woodside platform. All right, they got to get some more trains going. All right, that's my point.
Well, if you read the New York Daily News today, it sounded like the state doesn't have. They're lucky to have any money to fund these trains. They're actually talking about further fare increases and other things. I was speaking off the air with a New York State Assemblyman about this, and he was giving me his thoughts on the state budget. But we're a sports show, not a MTA budget show. Before I get to Chris, Carlos Otoro Chavez says, I live 10 minutes from Citi Field.
Oh, thanks.
God bless you, Carlos.
Thanks for rubbing it in.
Awesome.
I mean, for you, Chris, when you go to Yankee Stadium, do you go by the Long Island Railroad or how do you
I usually drive. I think it's easy because there's no railroad that goes in there. I'd have to take my line takes about an hour to get into the city. I'm on the Babylon line.
Okay.
So I take mine and it takes like an hour to get into the city, and then I have to go from the city up to the Bronx. So that's like another
if you get to Grand Central, you have to go on the 4 or 5 line. Yeah.
I just drive in. Driving in is not bad. I'm there in without traffic, I'm there in less than 40 minutes.
You drive the other way, right? Because you go through the the Throgs Neck, right? With the Queens Bronx Bridge. That's what you do, right? You drive over that way.
That way, but the way I usually go, because it's the way I've always gone, is the Triborough Bridge.
Okay. Yeah, you can see.
This will be my last comment about the MTA, and then we'll stop talking about it. All right, I think with the new Grand Central station, you can now go to Grand Central and then transfer to the Metro North to get to Yankee Stadium. I've had a few Yankee fans mention that to me.
I'd have to check that out, but yeah.
So I've had a few Yankee fans say that that's going to be easier for them. So we'll see. Maybe I'll show up at Yankee Stadium more often now. Not to root
about the time changes and everything because she's on a set schedule. She takes it every day, so I know she's not happy about it.
No, I can imagine. I can only sympathize with the people that have to, take these things. And I remember when I was going to school and I had to go into Manhattan, and I certainly do not miss those days, and I hope never to go back to them again. But enough about that. Carlos Otoro Chavez says, why not leave from the Jamaica station? You can take the F from Forest Hills. I don't think these guys are close to Forest Hills because Woodside is the other side of Queens. Or at least the other train tracks. I don't really think that gets you any closer here. So, okay, so we'll move off. I'm trying to remove the comment. There we go. I was going the other way, and I got lost on there on those comments. All right, so certainly those are some good stuff there. And I got to bring it up here real quick, and we'll move on to a few other blurbs things. Because, there's one minor NFL news note, and it kind of revolves Jet fans here. Is Derek Carr coming here or what? Because it seems like it's moving in a direction maybe Derek Carr, then some say Aaron Rodgers. I got to ask it again. I almost feel like I'm going to be asking this for a while. A little bit of NFL talk, but what do you guys think here when it comes to Derek Carr and any movement on the quarterback front?
You know what? I just think Carr is going to go around and see these other teams that are interested in him first. I think he wants to see about the offers he's going to get. He's playing the game of, he wants to check out what he's worth out there, But I think he also wants the best situation for him, not just financially, but team-wise. So I just think he's going to go around to either the Saints or the Colts or whoever else is out there and just check it out. And then he's going to come back, and you got to remember, he still has a family. He still has he still has young kids at home. So he probably wants to be somewhere where he's going to be, stable for the next 3 or 4 years or something, and hopefully a winning also a winning team as well. So I think Carr is the best option because you don't have to trade any draft picks for him. You just got to sign him. It's a clean transaction. Yep. With Aaron Rodgers, you got to trade picks, and then who knows what's going to happen in a year, right? Next off season, you're going to go through the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. Is he retiring? Does he want to get traded? Do you really want to go through that again? And does he want to go through that again? Does Aaron Rodgers want to go through? Think about this. I brought this up on the podcast. I'm like, does he really want to follow in Brett Favre's steps exactly the way he did it? Get traded from the Packers, go to the Jets for a year, and then maybe go to another team. I don't know if he wants to do that. I think he's either going to stay in Green Bay or just retire. I think our best bet is go for Derek Carr and then fill the rest of the holes you can through the draft and free agency, and let's see what we could do, All
right, let me throw a comment out there, which I put on the screen. I'll let the other guys join in. So let's say we follow Carlos Otoro Chavez's advice, and we don't go for Rodgers or Carr. Who's the alternative?
Who does
Carr? I know who he's probably referring to.
I don't know. Who does he want?
It's got to be Lamar Jackson. It's got to be Lamar Jackson then. It could be Jimmy G. But listen, I'll say this. All right, I'll say this real quick and then hand it over to Justin. I think the Jets are showing you right now that Derek Carr is number 3 on their list. Because I think that because supposedly according to reports. All right, the Jets, according to reports. All right, the Jets, hyped up Carr, said, you could come here, you could be a Hall of Famer here, you could do this, you could do that. All right, and they did all that, and then what have they done? Right, they've kind of just waited. And I know that Carr's representation, even his brother was saying that they were going to wait this out. Right, they were going to take their time, which is probably true. But I just think the Jets right now. Listen, Rodgers finally came out of that darkness retreat. All right, he's out. All right, and I think now they're going to try everything to get him. And again, I totally understand Chris's comments, and I think he has a great point. But at the same time, right, I understand Derek Carr is the easiest option, and I don't think anyone here would mind Derek Carr. Okay, I just think that when you talk about what the Jets can do with Derek Carr, you kind of say, all right, we could be a playoff team, we could be, a contender in our division, maybe. When you talk about Rodgers, you're talking about winning a Super Bowl potentially. I think there's a difference, and I think that is why the Jets are going to take their time.
He's only won one Super Bowl.
Well, listen. I'm not saying I do understand, and I know he hasn't won one in forever too. By the way, I mean it's been
for a decade. Yeah.
So, but the thing is that he has won one. He has had success in the NFL. I know there's been a few concerning stats with Carr, especially with his interceptions, some of his lack of efficiency in certain areas. So I do understand that. I do not think he is a bad quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback that would really make the Jets much better. I just think that is a different conversation with Rodgers and Carr when it comes to what you're thinking of doing. Like if you really want to win now, then you're going to go with a Rodgers to try to win in the next 2 years. If you think that, all right, we're still in a position where Carr can help us win, but we maybe need a few more years and he can develop with us to get to that ultimate level, then I would say Derek Carr maybe is your right choice. And I know that would definitely help us continue to build assets to get to that point, like Chris said, because you wouldn't have to use compensation. So, and then the last thing, because I know Carlos is going to have to bring it up.
He's got a bunch of comments. We have a bunch of them.
He's going to have to bring it up because I do think that the Jets are also waiting on Lamar Jackson. I do think they have not forgotten about him. Again, I already stated my opinions on that. I know Justin's going to. All right. But again, he's barely played the last 2 years. All right. He didn't even play the last 4 or 5 games the last 2 years. And he's asking for this mega contract and a lot, and for the Jets, like, I understand he's a young quarterback. I understand he's got a lot of upside. But is he really the guy you want to put all your fortunes in? Because I just don't think he's kind of like, is he going to get you to the Super Bowl? I don't know. And there's so much you got to do. So in that case, that's why I probably say Derek Carr. But I think for the Jets, I don't think they've ignored him. And I just think that they're going to continue to put those two kind of at the priority, and then Carr is there. But I think if they had more confidence in Carr, we would hear more.
And I would point out that Lamar Jackson only has one more career playoff win than Derek Carr. He's got one. That's just the one thing I would say.
Right.
But before I get to Justin, which I'm sure he'll piggyback off
that the Raiders have had the last few years. Let's
see what Carlos says. I got a feeling about this one.
All right. We'll do that here because I think these are good comments. Joey Bostrom first says, I think it's going to be Carr. So he's going on the record saying it's going to be Carr. Carlos Carlos wants Jimmy G or any serviceable quarterback. Jets
No.
still need to, but based on sheer playoff success, he has had the more recent playoff success of Carr or Rodgers. He has won.
But he's also glass, right?
True.
He also gets hurt every season.
And he also wants the O-line to be built up. He also says if the Jets stop blowing money and giving away draft picks, come on, man. Lamar people have Atlanta as a first option. He says, unfortunately, none of these guys will bring any team to a Super Bowl. I mean, Justin, we've heard Carlos, we've heard Brad, we've heard Chris. Where do you fall in this whole topic?
I think I'm going based on pure speculation. But I think I'm going to say this time next Friday, Aaron Rodgers is a New York Jet.
Whoa, wow. Okay.
Wow.
I think a trade will be worked out within the coming week. Obviously, it won't be finalized until March 14th or 15th, whenever the new league year starts. But I believe Aaron Rodgers will be a Jet by next Friday. I think it just makes too much sense at this point. And I think we're at a stage where the compensation that the Packers are receiving is really actually not going to be very significant. I would actually be surprised if they even get a second-round pick for Aaron Rodgers. I think you're looking at a third and a potential conditional second-round pick in 2024. The reason being is, one thing we heard is that it looks like the Raiders are not going to pursue Aaron Rodgers, right? So that's one team off the Aaron Rodgers wish list. So if it's basically the Packers and Jets or nothing else for Aaron Rodgers, then the Jets aren't going to have to give up a haul. They're not. They're going to still be able to have their 13th overall pick. They're going to be able to keep their future first-round picks. So it's not even a trade that's going to set them back, even if he's only here for 1 or 2 years. So I think in that retrospect, I think it's going to make all the sense in the world. Now, I do believe that they are waiting and hoping that Derek Carr, and like Chris said, Derek Carr's playing the long game right now. He's got other teams to visit. He's only visited the Jets since being granted free agency. Remember, he did visit the Saints before he was released, and they were trying to work out a trade package. But obviously that didn't work out, and I don't know if he really wants to go to New Orleans. So, where are his other landing spots? Carolina, Tampa. I'm not sure. San Francisco would be a nice landing spot, but they don't have the financial capability to give Derek Carr the contract that he wants. So I think the Jets are keeping that in the back of their mind. As for Lamar Jackson, if Joe Douglas trades for Lamar Jackson, I want him fired immediately. It's just simple as that. Because you're going to waste your next half a decade on a guy who's a glorified running back, gets hurt all the time. I mean, think about it. Why did their best receiver last year want out? Why did Hollywood Brown request a trade? Because Lamar Jackson doesn't get him the ball enough because he's not good enough to throw the football. Look, he had a great year in 2019. He did, and deservedly won MVP. But a lot of that, too, came on his legs. A lot. And how much longer is he realistically going to be able to play that game? I don't know. I just would not. I would not deal with a guy. And also, too, here's a guy with no agent. Here's a guy who's negotiating this contract himself with him and his mother. This is a disaster waiting to happen. So I would not touch Lamar Jackson. If there's a fallback option, I don't even know where I would go. I don't want Jimmy G. I don't want Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I
don't think Jet fans will take Ryan Tannehill. I
don't think Jet fans will take Jimmy G either. He's too injury prone. I'm sorry.
He's not that good.
He's not that good. He's too injury prone. Think about it. 2015 was the last time a Jet quarterback played all 16 games. That was Fitzpatrick.
Was that the 10-6 year?
Yes. It hasn't happened since, where the Jet quarterback played every single game, the same Jet quarterback. We started 3 quarterbacks last year.
Yep.
We're going to go down that same road again if you bring in a Jimmy G. Just going to happen.
I'll disagree. Number one with the Lamar Jackson. That's not a move that Joe Douglas wants to make, right? Because he's built on.
I wouldn't do it also because interesting, and thanks to the crack staff for giving us before I get back to you, Chris. Lamar Jackson and Jimmy G actually practically have the same career record. Jimmy G's 40-17, Lamar Jackson's 45-16. So I wouldn't want to give up all that for a guy that's got the same record as a Jimmy G who I could get for little.
Right, exactly.
I'll tell you one thing real quick. Lamar Jackson did not need to miss the last 5 games last year. I think he quit on the Ravens.
I don't know about that.
I think he quit on the Ravens.
I won't agree with that because I don't know. There's no reason to quit on your team. That was a team that could have made the playoffs.
It was a 2 to 3 week injury. He missed 6. Something's fishy.
Yeah, well, you never know. Right. But I going back to us getting Jackson. I don't think that's happening because to me that's not a Joe Douglas move. He likes his draft picks. That's how he was built. Going back to the Raven days and the Eagle days. They build through the draft. He's smart with that way.
Well, Carlos has got one which I think I brought up, and I know I'm going to get poo-pooed on this. And he brings up Daniel Jones.
No.
Are you serious?
Not at all.
That's his comment.
No,
hey,
you know
I'm
what?
just saying.
No, I don't want him either.
Consider it. If the Giants stupidly let him go, I got to consider it.
No, I wouldn't touch him because he's
young, though. I mean, listen, he's young, free agent.
He played one good year in his 4-year career.
I got to give him credit. He was pretty good as a rookie. He did have the fumbling issue and turnover issue then, but he also put up some pretty solid numbers.
Well, he had the first game against Tampa where he threw like 400 yards, and then he had a couple of the end of the season.
This year. Tell me that's impressive. Put them up.
All right. Thanks for the crack staff.
How many touchdowns did he have?
I'll read you. I'm reading them off.
Touchdowns a game.
Let's hear it. Here's his numbers. All right, I'm going to read off Daniel Jones's numbers.
22 total.
He had 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 3,205 yards, 67.2 completion percentage. He was sacked 44 times, so that was a little bit of a downer. Offensive line. And he was 9-6-1, 317 completions, 472 passing attempts. I mean, does that impress you?
I think he had 7 rushing touchdowns, over 700 yards.
Let's see if that's accurate. I don't, for whatever reason, the crack staff is not showing me that. Oh, there we go. You're correct. He actually had 708 rushing yards, 120 attempts. He had
almost 4,000 yards total offense, 22 touchdowns in a crap offense with no talent, except Saquon.
Yeah, I'm not touching Daniel Jones. Sorry.
Okay, I mean, numbers aren't bad. I do have more comments. Carr's numbers, by the way, 24 TDs, 14 INTs, 3,522 yards. He had a 60.8 completion percentage. He was awarded a Pro Bowl spot for whatever that meant. And from a running standpoint, he only ran 24 times for 102 yards. So he's not.
Yeah, that's not him. No, that's not him.
I guess
I will say.
Brad didn't look too impressed with either one.
Yeah, I will say that has been a big sticking point in some of the coaches that he's had, in the frustration that they've had with their cars, that he doesn't make enough plays with his legs. But it's just really not who he is, though. So, and
I'm going to read off Aaron Rodgers' stats and see what you guys think. He was 350 for 542, 64.6% completed, 3,695 yards, 26 TDs, 12 INTs, and then rushing-wise, he ran for 30. He had 34 rushes for 94 yards. So Rodgers' numbers were
with a broken thumb. So I'm not going to go by that.
He had a broken thumb half the year. Yeah.
Okay, so Rodgers' numbers though, but they were very similar to Carr's. Very similar. If you look at the passing yards, touchdowns, completions, they were near identical.
Just think about this with Rodgers. When you trade for him, you're trading for that contract as well. He's got 3 years left of $150 million guaranteed over 3 years.
But see, he doesn't. That's the thing. He doesn't.
No, he does.
No, he does, but he doesn't. A lot of that is like fake money, if you will, the way they manipulate the cap. He was set to make like 60-something million. There's no possible way without a restructuring that he can't even.
Well,
He's
not coming for nothing.
And I'm not even going to read off Jimmy G's numbers because he only had 10 games, and you guys
don't bother.
I said I wasn't going to read them off. So
don't bother Ryan Tannehill either. I don't want to hear it.
Well, his numbers weren't impressive at all. That I could tell you, even with an eye. I do have some comments from Carlos. Let me work because I'm way behind on some of them. He also said, Jimmy G or any serviceable quarterback, Jets need to build up an O-line. If the Jets start blowing money and giving away draft picks, come on, man. Lamar is a first option. Joey Bostrom also says, true about Jimmy G, but he needs to stay healthy. I don't think Rodgers will make it back to the Super Bowl, even if he stays on the Packers. I guess he would have a better path with the Packers in the NFC if you were going to go from that standpoint, because the AFC
definitely much easier.
The team is not great.
It's definitely much easier.
I mean, the NFC, who do you fear in the NFC right now? Okay, you got the Eagles, you got the 49ers. Dallas, you expect to be back in the postseason. Then after that, I mean, nobody fears the Vikings.
No.
Giants are a question mark, right, depending on what they do with quarterback.
What about Detroit, baby?
Yeah, that's right.
You're the Lions.
That's right.
Let me finish. But Detroit was 9-8. They would seem to be the team that would pick up the pieces with a guy that I wish we would have. Season, right? That was the quarterback I kind of wanted to bring up, Brad. I almost wish we had Jared Goff. I mean, the way he played in the second half of the season, I mean, he had a phenomenal year. I'll read his stats off. Rodgers could still go back to Cali and go to the 49ers? I don't think so.
I can't see it.
They got Purdy quarterbacks. Where does he play?
They don't want a third one.
Well, think about this. Well, first of all, the Packers have clearly stated they will not trade him within the NFC. So that is 15 teams out. They will not trade him within the NFC.
And also, I did want to read off Jared Goff's numbers. They were really good, actually. 4,438 yards, 29 TDs, 7 INTs, 65.1 completion percentage. He was sixth in the comeback of the year. And overall, he also had his yards per catch from his receivers were 11.6. Only sacked 23 times this year. Last year, 35 times sacked, 23 times. Back to the point with the offensive line.
Listen, the Vikings and the Lions are going to be in a dogfight next year for the NFC North. And you know what? With the hire of Brian Flores for defensive coordinator, I think things are going to really turn around for them defensively.
But if Rodgers comes back, would you still put Green Bay? If he comes back to Green Bay, wouldn't you put them in the next year?
But I personally see zero scenario where he's a Packer next year.
And everybody agrees with that? Nobody sees him coming back to Green Bay? Brad's on the fence.
I definitely see him. I think he either.
You know what? How does anybody really know what Aaron Rodgers thinks? This
guy.
I don't
know what it is.
He's on rainforest right now, and all of a sudden decided to play in Green Bay. I'm serious.
I think he either finishes Green Bay or he retires. That's
I'm going to say he plays though. My gut says
I don't think he takes another snap. If he's not a Jet, he's retiring. I don't think he takes another snap. Because I also think that the Packers are very set on starting Jordan Love next year. They are.
They didn't get it done this year, and you eventually have to find out what he is, right?
He's going into year 4. Aaron Rodgers went. Yeah, I know the contracts were structured a little bit different when Rodgers was drafted in 2005. But Rodgers went into year 4 before he started playing. After they moved on from Favre. And now we're going into year 4 with Jordan Love. We've seen him a little bit. I think he's made 1 or 2 starts.
2 years ago. 2 years ago.
It was 1 or 2 starts
this past year.
It's time. For the Packers. It's time to find out, and I think they're going to.
Absolutely.
I think they're going to struggle next year. I think the Vikings will benefit from the hire of Brian Flores. I think they'll get better next year. And then the Lions are going to be tremendous. So I
think the Vikings and Lions.
I don't see a path for them in the North. The Packers.
I think if Rodgers doesn't come back, I'm going to say, Brute, Lions and Vikings get 10 wins, maybe 10 or 11 wins each.
I can see the Vikings back. I can see the Vikings back with around 12.
We talked about them. The most wins in NFL history with a minus differential. That does.
But like I said, I also think their defense under Flores is going to be better than it was with Ed Donatel. I will say that.
But they're still stuck with Kirk Cousins, though. I don't know.
I think
this year was a mirage. I think he
started to turn things around. I think the defense just couldn't make the stop against the Giants, and I don't think that game was not on Cousins at all.
All right, I will read up before I do have a bunch of more comments I want to get to. Cousins, 29 TDs, 14 INTs, 4,547 yards, 60, just about 66% completion percentage. Pretty solid year as a whole. And also, rushing wise, he had not much of a runner, but in terms of his overall times he was sacked though quite a bit, 46 times. So his numbers sacks wise in terms of how many times went up drastically. More comments here. 49ers have players contracts to trade. Tannehill stats better than Carr. Because he brought it up. Before we get to closing thoughts, I will bring him up. 6-6, 2,536 yards, 13 TDs, 6 INTs. Now 21, which is a better barometer, 3,734 yards, 67.2 completion percentage. He had 21 TDs, 14 INTs. Rushing wise, he did in 21 have 270 yards. So a little bit more mobile. I still think Carr is a little bit of a better quarterback, though. So that's point taken. I don't want Daniel Jones, but it's a financial game. Joey Bostrom also says, I'm not touching Lamar Jackson with the 10-foot pole or Daniel Jones. I guess Daniel Jones then goes back to the Giants, you would think. And Lamar Jackson, Atlanta, you mentioned somebody. I mean, what about Tampa? I mean, Tampa's obviously got to figure out what they do with the quarterback situation. That would be maybe another destination, but I guess we'll find out. Obviously, NFL season still a ways to go, and as John Gonzalez last week reminded me about the NFL draft, but he was conspicuous in his absence. I think the reason that was here is that starting next week, maybe we'll get everybody ready for March Madness, because obviously the following week is Selection Sunday, and that Randy Dillon is not with us next week, so maybe we'll spend a little more time on the NHL, and we'll spend a little bit of time on college basketball to get everybody ready. So get your brackets ready, and we'll start that coverage on next week's show, because next week and then the following week you'll see conference play. You'll be your last week next week of conference play, and then the following week you'll have that whole cluster of a conference game, which will lead to Selection Sunday, which takes place this year March the 12th, and that's when the clocks, you get an hour. So you get an hour of sun, and we'll do our tournament this year. We'll do our bracket. So guys like Joey Bostrom and Carlos Otoro Chavez, you got to be here, and we'll do it, and we'll figure out the details and the groundwork, and all good stuff there with that. But, another comment here before I move on. Somebody wants to talk. Carlos Otoro Chavez says Rodgers will not retire and will be at a Hall of Fame induction with Tom Brady. That's what he says. He will not retire.
Well, but that means he'd have to retire this year.
Is he saying? Well, is he saying Tom Brady
won't retire because he doesn't want to be on the same?
He's saying
100%.
He says, let me read it off. He says Rodgers will not retire and be on a Hall of Fame induction with Tom Brady.
I get what he's saying, because if he did retire, he would be, and he doesn't want that with his ego.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, he would certainly be second on the totem pole easily on that, because of the amount of Super Bowls and sort of wins here. And Joey Bostrom says tournament time almost. Yep, I'm excited about that. I am excited about this year's tournament. I'm a little bit disappointed, but we'll get to in a few minutes with the Brew Force in terms of a local team that we cover. I'm still trying to get over that, but we'll figure all that out here. Obviously, a lot we ran into tonight. We covered pretty much everything, despite people were saying, oh, what are you going to talk about tonight? Anthony Finkel was like, when I saw him Sunday, but what are you going to talk about the next couple of weeks? I'm like, trust me, there'll be plenty to talk about. And I always say that there'll definitely be a lot. You got baseball, WBC. Maybe we'll spend some time on for next week's show. We'll also get into the NCAA for sure. And NHL, we'll spend a little more time on that. But certainly we ran the gauntlet. We'll see if Justin's predictions come through. We'll see about the Brew Force, if he's in a continued good mood with the Knicks. And we'll see if Chris gives us the good vibes with the MLB rules changes. But Justin Gianelli, you're up first here at the plate. Want to give you some closing thoughts. Anything that you want to plug, share, say with us. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to playing the Baseball Banter show throughout the weekend and more of those shows. Ernest Stove gave us a baseball show with a former friend of the show and Stephen Villine. So getting into baseball coverage, Pinstripe Chronicles have been back into some extra shows. So excited about baseball. And Justin, I give you the floor. Anything else you want to plug, share, say, and floor is yours. Fire away.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be back for another week. So I got back in the fold with the Baseball Banter. I spoke a lot about the new rules as well in that episode. Spoiler alert if you haven't listened already. And one quick stat that I wanted to bring up that I didn't get to when we were talking about the pitch clock. Out of 399 qualified pitchers, according to the StatCast, only 20 averaged fewer than 15 seconds. So you're talking about a major adjustment. And that's 15 seconds with no runners on base. As for the 20 seconds with runners on base, only 12. Including Edwin Diaz, actually, who averaged 19.8 seconds between pitch. So it's a big adjustment for a lot of pitchers, and it's going to be interesting to see how that affects how that affects them early on in the season, because they're used to pitching at their own pace and just kind of going about it a little more so nonchalantly. So I think that's going to be one of the bigger adjustments early on in the season. So, and we're entering a new time where the game's going to be faster. The batter's got to be ready to go. Like I said, within 7 seconds. We saw it today. Manny Machado started in a bat down 0-1 because it wasn't ready.
Rob Morosky had mentioned it. Yep.
In the allotted time. So, the umpires are enforcing it in early spring training. There were some games today. Obviously, the Mets had an intra-squad game, but overall, yeah, looking forward to see what happens over the next week with some of the NFL news, with some more of the NHL. Devils got a big win last night over the Kings. A nice comeback win, that is, and they got to try to keep some distance, and we'll see what they do, because next time we're on the air, the trade deadline will have passed. It's next Friday, March 3rd. So, it'll be interesting to see what move the Devils make to push towards the playoffs and maybe a special run deep into the postseason. Who knows?
It's been a good run. It's been a good run for the Devils. I was speaking with somebody, I forget who it was. Yes. Oh, it was Wednesday night. One of our listeners called me up and he said, what did you think about the NHL and the locals? And I said, well, the Devils, to me, I think they've really been the surprise, because they got off to the great start, cooled off, but they've been played pretty well since then. And I think they're the team I'm really watching most on the move. Rangers, we knew. Islanders kind of where they were for the most, I think, expected in terms of the season. And I think that, obviously, if you want to count them as a local, the Buffalo Sabres have been kind of the other surprise, I think, in the Eastern Conference.
They're hanging around for that last spot. They got
the games in hand. They got a whole. I know Chris is like, what's going on with these games in hand? But
I don't get it. I don't get how the schedule worked out like that. But the Islanders are the first team to 62, which means they have 20 games to go. If I'm not mistaken, the Devils are only like 58, I think. So I don't get how they played so many games. I guess they obviously must have a ton of off days coming up, because at some point these games have to catch up and they have to even out for the other teams.
Well, we have, I believe we have 6 weeks left in the regular season, because I believe the season ends on April the 8th, if I'm not mistaken, right? The season ends around April 8th, April 9th.
Yeah, I believe it's Saturday, April 8th, because I know at least for the. Oh wait, the Devils play April 13th against the Capitals.
Oh wow, the season's going that long. It used to be, when I was a season ticket holder, the season would end usually on a Saturday or a Sunday, but they're going to the 13th, which would mean we've got almost 7 weeks of the season. So yeah, the Islanders are going to have a lot of off days. There's no question.
They're going to have to. I mean, you think about it, they have only 20 games to go, and a lot of teams have like
the Islanders.
Like the Devils have 24.
Yeah, the Islanders have 3 days off after Tuesday. They have another 3 days off after Saturday's game next week.
It's gonna start spreading out, and this is where these games in hand are going to catch up. And look, no guarantee that these other teams win their games at hand, and maybe the Islanders catch a break that way. But it's hard. It's hard relying on other teams, especially.
Yeah, it's almost like
play pretty well.
It's like playing the lotto.
But I think the thing that the Islanders are fortunate about is the fact that Pittsburgh and Washington are playing some bad hockey recently.
Yes, and Florida has.
I think
Detroit and
that
Buffalo
might
are
still.
hot right now.
Who's that?
Detroit and Buffalo.
Detroit and
Are the two
Buffalo.
teams.
Yeah, those are the two teams I think of the biggest concern. But if Pittsburgh or Washington are struggling, that may still leave a spot for the Islanders, and then Detroit and Buffalo end up fighting out that last spot. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up ultimately. It would be between Detroit, Buffalo. I'm going to say Florida, and I'm going to bite the bullet and say the Islanders.
Florida too.
Yeah, I'm going to say those 4 teams. I think Pittsburgh, Randy and I spoke, kind of feel like they'll fall out of it, and Capitals are in sell mode. So I'll say those 4 teams hang on and compete. I think 2 of them will obviously get it because that's all that you can get. But we'll wind up seeing great stuff. Obviously, baseball banter, B-ball banter SM, also JGNLE91 on Instagram and Twitter. And before I get to Chris, Joey Bostrom says he'll try to be on Creed 3 comes out next Friday, which means Joey's going to be out there. He's going to be boxing probably at, I would hope you'll be going to, which one will you be going to, Joey? The one on Highland Boulevard on Newdorp Lane? Or will you be going to in the Staten Island Mall? You're closer to the Highland Boulevard Theater, the new theater, the Alamo, is the Alamo Draft Theater, I think they call it, something like that. That's probably where you're going to end up. But give us a review if you are watching Creed 3. I did see, obviously, the trailer, and I do hope to see it myself. And Chris, certainly you can give us a punching like a heavyweight closing thoughts. Anything else you want to plug, share, say? Looking forward to hearing the Liftoff Jets. I've enjoyed the Talking Rivals as well this week, so I turn it over to you, and floor is yours, and fire away.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for everything, guys. Great show as always. Had a great time. We're going to, on Talking Rivals, we're going to continue with our preview in each division. I think we're going to do the Central, AL Central this week. And then I think next week we're going to start the National League. And I think we're going to go to the National League East. And I've asked Rob to join us.
Maraska?
Hey, he's got all the Mets. He's got all the Mets stuff. So I need some help.
He is the Mets guy. His own family have told me at the dinner table.
Okay,
it's like he's the Mets guy.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Rob Maraska. And he'll promote it. No, I will tell you, he will definitely. You'll get some new listeners. I can promise you on that one. So he's a good promoter. I will always say that about Rob.
Okay. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll have Rob joining us, and you can join us at TalkingRivals.com, at Talking Rivals on Twitter, and then Liftoff Jets. We're going to get Andrew Golden next week. This week he couldn't make it. So hopefully we'll get him on next week, and we'll get into the offseason a little more. And I'm curious to see what he thinks on the whole quarterback situation as well. So because as we see, we got 4 or 5 different ideas on what's going to happen.
I think we're going to have more next week because I think it's still going to be a topic. I think that there'll be
absolutely
more
until Rodgers makes his decision and Carr makes his decision. It'll be out there, and Daniel Jones is still out there too. So who knows? But you could always catch me, CP7NY, and also Liftoff Jets on Twitter as well.
All right, look forward to that. Gave us a little bit of NFL news, and sooner rather than later, the NFL draft will be around. And if you feel that much of a football to talk about, there's always the USFL and the XFL and stuff like that. But before, Brad is that he ain't talking about that, which I could see we weren't going there. But before we get to the Brute Force, Joey Bostrom wants to tell me the Staten Island Mall AMC, which was when I was a ticket holder, when I had my AMC pass, that was my home theater. So that's a good choice. So make sure you see Creed 3 in IMAX and sit back and enjoy and give us the review. But we didn't certainly save the best for last, but we saved the biggest for last here. That is the Brute Force, Brad Weiss. Obviously, a lot of closing thoughts here. Obviously, this is the second time we've seen each other this week. Obviously, we had a pregame show, which we were hoping would have led into a little bit more, but I'm sure we'll get into reasons why, and we'll also talk about some friends. I have some local college basketball news on some coaches that were made permanent. I'd like to share somebody that coached against you. I'd like to give him a recognition and a shout out, but until then, you're up first, the Brute Force, and you know the drill by now, and the floor is yours. Fire away.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for another great edition of Friday Night Live, the final one in February as we move on to March. Crazy enough already, 3 months into the year. But another great show. So thank you, Chris, Justin, again, for your work. Thank you, Randy Dillon, Rob Maraska, for their good work as well. You can follow me on Facebook, Bradley Weiss, Twitter at BradWeiss20, Instagram at BWeiss20 and at Coach Brad Weiss, and TikTok at BWeiss20. So to start this off real quick, I want to talk about the team because you mentioned the Milwaukee Bucks as one of the hottest teams.
I did 13 wins in a row. Yes, I did.
But I think I'm representing one of the hottest teams in basketball, and that is the Long Island Nets. And
yes,
today I had a Long Island Nets clinic. We had the head coach of the Long Island Nets, 2 players, and a few others from the organization. So it was a lot of fun. But the Long Island Nets have won 12 straight games. They have been absolutely incredible in the G League. They've been getting some big wins. They play Ryan Terrell in the Motor City Cruise again coming up soon in March. So I'm excited.
Right?
I believe it's the first or second week of March. So I'm excited. I'm going to try to get to that game as well. But the Long Island Nets, everybody should give them a follow at Long Island Nets. They're doing big things. Justin's Brooklyn Nets may need some of those guys to move up after the performance tonight. But ultimately, the Long Island Nets are the hottest team around, especially around. So I wanted to give them a shout out. I'll be back at their practice facility tomorrow, working with them in the hospital for special surgery, who's going to come in and do a player evaluation, all our players who are participating in the clinic. So we're looking forward to that. Now to get to the somber news, Tom Bryce. Listen, first of all, we had one of our best shows in Sports Report history with that pregame show on Tuesday.
Oh, my God. Did you see how many people shared on Instagram? I mean, I had literally, I think it was, I lost count, 12 or 1,300 people that shared on Instagram those announcements. I mean,
it was an amazing show. Gordon couldn't have been better.
Oh, my God. Awesome. He was a natural. When I asked him, I'm like, is he the right guy? We were speaking about it off the air, and this guy came in. He was like, a natural. He was like a pro.
Oh, he was spectacular, and the impersonation video, I keep watching it over and over.
I know. Listen, even
it's
now,
awesome.
I think, dude, we had over 500 people have viewed that video already.
Oh, it's awesome. It was awesome, and it was right on point. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard somebody accurately talk like me than Gordon did. So that was pretty awesome.
He was good. He was the way he described us and the way he did the whole. I mean, he really must have been. You know, when I was seeing my Instagram stories over the past 2 years, when Gordon was really checking out my Instagram stories, I guess he really was checking them out after all this time.
Oh, they're definitely checking them out. We appreciate their support. Danny Burns was great.
Danny's coming back in 2 weeks. Danny's going to talk about the ceremony, and Danny was actually speaking with Danny, and he wound up watching the game, which we'll get to in a second. He was very disappointed. He was kind of hoping we would have had more shows.
Yeah, no, he was terrific, and of course the legendary Alec Willis, who obviously I played against, but just a great guy, and he does a terrific job every time he comes on.
Yeah, he's another pro. Well, he's a real estate broker now. He better be a pro. I mean, he's selling homes.
Yeah, but he's always been a good talker and a leader, so I really appreciate about him. And they came on and did a great job. But unfortunately, our Golden Eagles did lose to Yeshiva on Tuesday. Very disappointing loss, in my opinion. You know, going up 10 in the first half.
We're up 11. We're up 11, 28-17.
Right. And going up by 8 in that halftime. You felt good. I mean, you felt like they should have been winning by more in the first half. You know, they had a lot of turnovers that led to, you know, some easy Yeshiva baskets, and also, you know, a lot of mistakes led to St. Joe's probably not scoring as much as they should have. But it's funny how, you know, and again, John Gonzalez, of course, doesn't show up this week to hear that I was right. He never wants to hear I'm right. But I was right when I talked about the beginning of the second half being the most important, crucial part of the game. And unfortunately for our Golden Eagles, that was the part of the game that they lost it.
They turned the ball over. It was three consecutive possessions. I think it was literally like the same play that happened. Yeshiva got the ball and laid it up.
Yeah, and, you know, they just compounded mistakes. As I said, we talked about it in the show. If they compounded mistakes, that's where Yeshiva comes and gets you. And unfortunately, that's what happened. It kind of got off for a while. They went up 2, Yeshiva. We called timeout. We did come back and fight back a little bit.
Yeah, when we got the lead, I think we were up we actually had the lead back.
We were up by 4. I think that's the highest we got it to, I believe. I think we got it back to 4.
We were up at least 2. I think we were up. My count was 2.
Might have been 4. I don't know. Either way, obviously after that, Yeshiva took the game over, started hitting their threes as we talked about. The turnovers kept mounting. We missed a couple chippies at the basket.
Yep.
And it just continued to compound, and Yeshiva does what they do. They made shots. They took advantage of their momentum. They had some huge offensive rebounds in M1, especially from Zucker.
Gordon, I don't know if Gordon was messaging you during the game, but me and Gordon were speaking, and he kept saying offensive rebounds. They were killing us, which was uncharacteristic because Yeshiva was toward the bottom of the Skyline Conference in rebounds, and we were toward the top of the conference.
You know, to go back to my keys from Tuesday, I said the rebounding battle. We had to dominate. And unfortunately, you know, that we did not dominate as much as we should have. Obviously, our buddy Liam Sheehy had a tough game.
But you know what? We didn't have secondary scoring either. You know.
Again, to another one of my points, Tom. I said production off the bench, and we just didn't have much production besides Xavier Allen. Obviously, you had a great game.
He mathematically scored, I think, almost half our points. He had 27 points. 29. There you go.
Yeah, he had 29 points.
That was his high of the season, by the way. His high of the season.
Yeah, he was terrific. I mean, you know, Alex Tabata made some plays in the second half, but didn't have his best game. Spencer
had a good first half, but kind of struggled. He had 4 fouls, and Uhl had to figure out when to slot him back in, and he never quite got into the rhythm. But I think between Allen and Malloy, they had literally, 45 of our 58 points. You can't win without that.
No, and you know, we talked about all season, Tom. The reason why this team was winning was because of their depth and how many places they could get scoring from. And in this game, you know, you got to give some credit to Yeshiva. But I do think when you talk about controlling the controllables, St. Joe's did a poor job of controlling the rebounds, controlling the turnovers. What they could have controlled, they didn't do a great job of, and that's why they lost. Ultimately, I think they really beat themselves in this game.
It reminded me a little bit of, in some ways, the Manhattanville game last year. You know, we had the lead. You know, it was close, and then we kind of just the last 5 especially the last 6 minutes of both those games. You know, we just couldn't make the plays. I mean, Yeshiva still gave us chances despite them. They were up, I think, 10 or 11, and we got back to, I think we were within 4 or 5 with less than 2 minutes left. There was possessions. We had a chance, and we just couldn't capitalize.
No, we couldn't execute. And like I said, a few missed layups, a few chippies, a few bad turnovers. And again, like I said, you know, again, they won the game, but St. Joe's beat themselves. And I know that they're going back and they're looking at film and probably watching some of the mistakes that they made and feeling like they could have done better. But in the end, you know, Coach Uhl should be proud of himself in his first year. This team, you know, could have easily had its ups and downs, which they did, but they were up for the most part. They had a good year. They had adversity with Tabata being out the first half of the season.
He missed a lot of games. Tim missed a lot of games
for a while. They had adversity, and I think that they did a good job managing it. You know, you play a tough team in Yeshiva in the first round, and you give them a game, and you really, again, you feel like you had
a tough job because they won 10 games in conference, and usually that indicates the last 2 years. Listen, I'm not making an excuse. We won 12 games last year. We're on the road. We win 10 games in conference this year. We're on the road. We didn't catch a break. Break.
But, you know, listen, the guys, we all know, we're not going to make excuses. They're good guys. They know what it takes.
Great guys, yep.
And, you know, again, we're proud of them as much as we're upset they lost. We're proud of the season they had. We appreciate you guys for all your support of our show. And we appreciate
oh, my God. I mean, the last week, I mean, I got so many new followers. I mean, my goodness. I mean, these clips, these videos that we had on Instagram, I mean, unbelievable. I mean, these were some of the biggest we ever had on Sportswire, ever.
Yeah. So thank you guys for the support. We're looking forward to continuing covering you guys. And I think one of the most exciting things for me is now we have a guy like Gordon, who's a former player, coming on and doing a great job, but also my former teammate, Matt Hurd. I'm really looking forward to having him on the show. I think he's going to be terrific when he comes on. You know, Coach Uhl hopefully will come on as well. Some of the other guys in the future. So we have a nice connection, and I want to thank as well, Tom Brace, the Skyline Conference.
You stole my words.
I know, but the Skyline Conference taking our videos and reposting them and helping us as well shows that they really saw what we do and how we cover it, and they put us out there.
I think that was the most. I mean, I've had bigger recognition. We had a boxer that literally in the town of England, it was massive. And some wrestling spots do those numbers, but to have that for college sports was like unbelievable. What the Skyline Conference did for us in terms of that recognition, I mean, that put a lot of eyeballs out there for us.
Yeah, and again, it just helps us continue to grow and get better here on Sportswire Radio. So we're looking forward to that. Once again, thank you to the guys. My last comment, obviously, it wasn't just the Golden Eagles that lost, but it was my Plainview JFK Hawks that lost as well in the first round of the playoffs at Port Washington. I want to congratulate our seniors for a great year, and I'm excited for the future of the program. Obviously, another tough loss as well, just like we talked about with our Golden Eagles. But there's time to grow, there's time to get better, and we're looking forward to that as we continue to grow with our Golden Eagles, with our Hawks, and throughout the teams that I coach. So looking forward to that. This weekend we got Level Up Long Island tryouts. If you're interested, follow us at levelup_LI on all social media platforms. So thank you guys for another great week. Looking forward to another great week again in the month of March as we inch closer to the baseball season and, of course, March Madness, which I'm very much looking forward to. And one last shout-out, by the way, because on my third grade team, I have a kid named J.J. Tartamella. His father is the coach at St. John's, the women's coach. Yeah. And they had one of the biggest upsets in sports history going into UConn and beating UConn on their home court. So I texted Joe right after the game to congratulate him on an amazing job. That is a unbelievable
win. That's a program builder. That's a win that.
Oh yeah.
I would almost put it almost in this. Well, it's probably bigger, but it's almost similar to when we went into Yeshiva last year. I would say this is a little bigger. St. John's and UConn, but UConn. I mean, the last 35 years they've been the gold standard in sports. I'd even say not even just college sports or women's sports, but in sports. And certainly, congratulations to Coach Tartamella. Big deal there.
Oh yeah, so it was awesome. Texting him, he was proud just to see the players. He's
gonna forget you now. Now he's gonna be big time now, like Mike McSloy was.
Well, listen, he is big time. He's been there. He's been there about 9-10 years. He's done a great job. So I hope that for them, they can have a good run here in their Big East tournament and hopefully make the tournament. That would be awesome. But Tartamella is a great guy. His son is a stud. I love him. So I'm looking forward to seeing them soon. But I wanted to give them a shout out because that's nothing to sneeze at. That they beat one of the best teams in women's college basketball history this season on their home court. On top of that.
And nobody almost does that. I think South Carolina might have did it earlier this year, but South Carolina was number one in the country. But obviously, congratulations to Coach Tartamella and everybody there on the St. John's team and the program as a whole. And also shout out to young JJ, who I'm sure is on his way to bigger and better things also. And Joey Bosham wants to say before we get out of here, great show again. I needed this tonight. And he also says he saw that St. John's won over UConn. Great win. And we definitely agreed, and I obviously again want to congratulate the Golden Eagles. I know before we get out of here, to me, I think it was a successful season. 13 wins, back-to-back winning seasons. First time we've accomplished that in over a decade. Back-to-back 10-win seasons or more in the Skyline Conference. First time we've done that since John Matejko was here. Also getting back-to-back appearances in the Skyline Tournament playoffs. Haven't done that since John Matejko was here. This team had a lot of adversity. They really only played together fully as a unit for a grand total of 2 games? If that, I mean, for a team to have done what they have done and still get to the Skyline Conference playoffs, get a winning record. They had wins over Farmingdale. They had wins over Yeshiva at the Max Stern Athletic Center. And they had wins over York, which was in the playoffs in the CUNYAC John Jay. I mean, it was a lot of wins here. They had the Mount St. Vincent wins. Those were 2 key wins. I mean, if you look at this team, there was a lot of key moments that this team had. So I think there's a lot to be proud of. I think a lot of guys are going to still be back on this team. Obviously, I want to congratulate again Matt Hurt. Certainly, Matt had a decorated career here, and I don't think it's going to be the end of him as a basketball player, especially as a coach or anything else. So I know that we'll still hear more from him on Sportswire, and obviously Gordon Scheuer. Gordon, we're going to have back next month. We've already been speaking about that, so we'll set that up when things die down a little bit. Coach Gordieso, I still have to get him back on. We'll talk about the team with him as well. I know he's not with us at SJLI, but still we want to give him some time, and I know he's a big supporter of ours. But yeah, just feel bad about the guys, but I know we can harp on the game and some of the different things that happened. Obviously, lack of secondary scoring. I think turnovers, offensive rebounds that Yeshiva got. Those were the differences in the game. But that's a tough environment, Brad. Listen, that's an environment. You have what 500-600 people there, and you're playing basically. We spoke about it with Danny and Alec, and they had a lot of success there. They know and. Everything, unfortunately, we said, Brad, about the game, that's how I think a hell of a job we did kind of came to fruition, unfortunately. But look, it doesn't take away from the season. Liam Shee's coming back. I know he's a grad student, but I spoke with him. He's back for one more year. We get Timmy Hurd back. I want to congratulate also Mark Roberts Jr. This is the end for him. Obviously, Mark was a big, important player. You played against him in practice, and he was a teammate. Also, Jake Audiello. It appears to be the end of Jake Audiello here. I want to congratulate him on his run. But Alec Tabbitt is coming back. Xavier Allen is coming back. Spencer Malloy. Ryan McNeely, Justin Turner, Basir Hoyt. I mean, Nick Nemekis, your old friend, our buddy, Chris Cotters, Tom Bell. So a lot of good players. The team, I think, next year is going to be back. It's going to be a tough conference, but you know what? I think what these guys did is they showed they're for real. It was not a fluke last year, and I think they're going to be back. So I think at the end of the day, there's a lot to be proud of. Matt Hurd, especially one of the greatest three-point shooters we had in the school's history, back-to-back playoff appearances. We'll get his thoughts on that, I'm sure, next month. And obviously, Gordon, I think we made a new friend, a new analyst, and Alec Willis. Big shout out to Alec Willis. Alec will be back with us for sure in a couple of weeks. Love Coach Willis. I can't believe I'm calling him Coach Willis now. He's certainly moving up his ranks as well. And Jonathan Reno, a player that he had at Moore, didn't get a chance to highlight that. Danny Burns is going to be back in 2 weeks. Very excited to have Danny. Danny's a big fan of us. Danny's always messaging me about what you said, Brad, or he still calls you the Brute Force. I thought it was the funniest thing when he said, "What is that your real name, the Brute Force?" I thought that was the most funniest thing. We love Danny. Danny's been one of our biggest supporters. But before we get out of here, I want to give a couple more shout-outs. I want to congratulate Damani Merritt. Damani Merritt of Five Towns College just scored 1,000 career points for the men's basketball team. And Damani's going to be back with us in a few weeks. And the guys are playing later today in the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Tournament in Five Towns there at the Sound Arena. So I want to give him a big shout-out. Let's pray that he keeps going with his career. I also want to congratulate Linda Day. Unfortunately, our Lady Bloodhounds came a little short tonight in the CUNYAC championship game against Brooklyn College and lost a very tough game. But I have a hopeful feeling that the Bloodhounds are not done and they get into the ECAC tournament. Hopefully, we can speak with Coach after that. We'll see what happens. But still 18 wins there. Think about what Coach Day, she inherited to what she has now. Also, congratulations to Katie Healy. I've interviewed Katie Healy, and she is almost the school's all-time leading scorer. She had almost all the categories. She was a soccer champion, played the women's team, and led them to the NCAA tournament. We were this close. We were almost there, but I have a feeling that we'll get there eventually. And Alex Slang at Brooklyn, Brad, you know very well, just does a phenomenal job. I also want to congratulate Jamel Gist over at York. As I'm sure you're aware of, he is no longer the interim head coach. He is the permanent head coach, well-deserved. Took the Cardinals to the playoffs back-to-back years and had a number of players that I'm sure we'll speak about with Coach Gist. So I really want to congratulate him. He's been a very, very big supporter of ours over the years, and I am very, very thankful that he continues to support us. But congratulations. Could not think of a better person to lead that program there. And also, one more time, I want everybody to follow the Golden Eagles men's basketball team at SJLA_MBB on Instagram and Twitter. Want to thank the Skyline Conference one more time and thank everybody that viewed all these shows in Five Towns as well. Sydney Mountain, Brad, you're going to be curious on her. She's a broadcaster, soccer star, and a basketball star. We literally have the triple threat coming on Wednesday. This Sydney Mountain, I'm telling you, she's going to take your spot one day. She's already primed and poised, and we're going to get her here. So I want to recognize Sydney Mountain as well. So thank you, everybody, here for tuning in on the number one global radio station that is Sportzwire Radio. We're here with Justin Gianelli of the Baseball Banter Show. Chris Pizzea of the Liftoff Jets, which you'll hear tonight, also from the Talking Rivals, and the man who was 26 all-time in SJLI Golden Eagles men's basketball history and rebounds. He is the head coach for the Plainview JFK Hawks boys JV team, also an assistant with the varsity team, also with the Long Island Nets, who are on a 12-game winning streak, and a level-up basketball organization that is the Brute Force Brad Weiss. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. If you're on sportnarium.com/player, you go back to your regularly scheduled programming. If you are on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, I will be back Sunday afternoon, evening, UK time with pro wrestling star Big Cheese Logan, who literally might be bigger even than the brute force Brad Weiss and looks like you a little bit. If you're going to be, when you're 35, you'll probably look like this guy. So that'll be a lot of fun. We'll talk with. Thank you again to everybody. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. Thank you. Good night on the number one global radio station that is Sports.